Welcome to the Longest Turn Board Gaming Podcast. This is episode 43, the Undaunted episode. My name is Tyler.
Hello, this is Kevin.
And this is Mark.
In this episode, we are going to discuss all things Undaunted. There are a number of Undaunted games. We're going to get into them. We've got a couple other cool surprises for you.
We do. Exciting stuff.
We all just found out that we basically none of us slept at all last night.
So we don't know if this episode's going to be any good.
Although we suspect it will be magical.
Yeah, I'm hoping for magic. I think it's going to be magical for sure.
Definitely.
A lot of Undaunted though, which is going to be great.
Mark, it's good to see you and have you on the podcast again.
It's good to be back.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a little bit.
I was about to check. Yeah, the last time we had you on was episode 35, the spring break episode, where we just talked about games we've been playing lately.
And here we are at the end of summer. It's been a while, too long.
Summer's gone by too fast.
And it's been a weird summer in Colorado.
It has been a weird summer.
June was like living in Seattle, and it was 65 to 73 degrees.
It's like monsoon season.
It was kind of amazing.
Yeah, it was. Well, and what's weird is everything is still green here, which does not happen at the end of July.
Yeah,
right?
It is lovely.
Yeah,
Yes.
everything is super pretty, but it has been a weird summer. And the kids are going back in like a week. Like, what's that all about? It's crazy. Back to school.
It's crazy. They do go back to school early here, though.
They do.
They've been packing it in, though. My kids have had no reason to complain over break. They've been living their best life.
Hey, you guys went to Hawaii, right?
We were in Hawaii a couple weeks ago.
Nice.
Turns out it's actually amazing there. Who would have thought?
Yeah.
That's weird. So still amazing. Yeah, I went a few years back, so still not a bad place to go, huh?
Yeah, you know it's good when a house full of teenagers have nothing to complain about. So
Yeah, that was nice.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah, we were talking about doing a trip at some point this year, and I was like, let's just go to Hawaii for Christmas. I don't know.
Meliki Maka.
We haven't done a family vacation in a long time, so
Is that going to happen?
I don't know.
Hawaii for Christmas?
I don't know. I might need to take out a small loan to make that happen.
Yeah, it's not the cheapest trip, but
No.
it's a fun one.
We kind of felt like we had to, though, just because our oldest is about to head out to college. So
Nice. Where's he headed to?
Colorado State.
Awesome.
Oh, that's awesome. Very cool.
That's right. So he'll be still in this neck of the woods, but not super close. So interesting time in our household, but exciting.
That's awesome.
Very cool.
Well, should we get into it?
Let's get into it.
All right. So, first cool announcement.
Right.
I was getting ready to go to Origins, and I reached out to David Thompson, and we were talking about possibly playing Undaunted Battle of Britain. And he was nice enough to offer a copy of it to us. But Kevin and I had both pre-ordered Battle of Britain.
Because this is one we've been excited about for a while.
Yes, and it lives up to that hype.
Yep, it does.
And so I said, well, how about if we do a giveaway with that copy? He was like, yeah, that'd be great. And so for this episode, we are going to give away a copy of Undaunted Battle of Britain from Mr. David Thompson.
Yeah, so this will be for U.S. only, unfortunately. We can only afford shipping at this point in the U.S. But go to our Discord. We'll have a channel set up, instructions on how to enter the contest. Follow those instructions. You'll be entered to win. And about a week after this episode airs, we'll draw a random winner to win Undaunted Battle of Britain. And we'll ship it out to you. So
yeah, join our Discord. The link is in the show notes. So that's surprise number one.
And we have two surprises.
Yep. The second surprise, and this is awesome.
Yep.
A little while ago, we got to interview David Thompson.
And we will be airing that interview on this episode.
Right now. So it's a little bit.
Audio quality may not be great at times, but there's a lot of good content.
All right. So Kevin and I have the privilege of talking to David Thompson, well-known and amazing designer that we got to meet last year at Origins. We were actually at the Rolling Dice and Taking Names dinner, and we're just sitting there talking to people at our table, and one of the guys was like, yeah, I've designed a couple games, and then we come to find out it's David Thompson. That was such a cool experience for us. It was just really neat to meet you at that dinner. And then I got to learn Undaunted Normandy from you at Origins last year. And
I had to leave early for that one, and you gotta actually learn the game, which is pretty cool.
And I was gonna say, Tyler, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't we play 4-player when I taught you?
We did. You played double-handed. Okay. One of your buddies from work, I think, was there, and he and I played against you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's my favorite. That's my favorite way to play. I love playing team games in general and reinforcements with 4 players.
So, awesome. So who won?
That was a treat.
Did you take it easy on him, Dave?
I don't remember. I genuinely don't remember who won.
I don't remember either.
We all won. Won.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I just remember I'm playing with the designer and I'm not picking up the rules as fast as I should. Oh no, so
I'm so nervous.
Yeah. No, but that
was an awesome dinner because I'm a big podcast listener. I don't that's really the only board game, but I listen to tons of them. And but you guys hadn't been out that long, right? When we met, I think you were like on episode 8 or 9 or something.
Yeah,
we
were really fairly new,
right? Yeah, and the one unfortunate thing about there's no like central repository, and there's not really a great way to discover them. So I hadn't heard of you guys yet, and then so after we met and we started talking, I started listening to the podcast, and your guys' podcast style is what I dig, right? So it's comparable to the RDTN guys and Secret Cabal and some of the other podcasts I really enjoy, which is to say, like, your buddies sitting around talking about games, right? So it was an easy one for me to get into.
Yeah, awesome. That's some pretty good company there. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I guess 2016 was your first published game, Armageddon. And fast forward about 7 years later, now you've, I think you got close to about 30 published games credited to you. And a lot of those are co-designs. Did you ever envision your designer career taking off like this?
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, I'm super fortunate. I've had, you can be, talented or smart or whatever, but like, no matter what, it's always like sort of being blessed in the right place at the right time. And I just happened to be, when I first started getting interested in board games and board game design, happened to be moving to the UK, and I just happened to stumble into a group of like a design playtest meetup group in Cambridge with these, established designers, Brett Gilbert and Matt Dunstan. They kind of were there to help, a bunch of, starting designers who were just getting their feet wet, and introduced me to like the world of going to Spiel and pitching to publishers and all of that stuff. So for sure, looking back, that was 2014. So looking back then, I had no clue what I was doing. Right. So no, it was certainly no dream. And, it's success is all like measured differently, right? Like there's like wingspan success, right? But, and then there's like reasonable levels that mortals can achieve, like Undaunted, right? Which
sure.
is to say it's never going to be, gangbusters, but it's, in the world of board games, it's relatively successful.
So at that time, is that when you met Trevor Benjamin? I know you have a lot of design with him in particular. In England, that's where you met up with him originally?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it was a very interesting playtest group, and it still goes on to this day. But even though it was in Cambridge, there were almost no British people there. So Trevor's Canadian. Obviously I'm American. Yeah. We meet up in Cambridge. But there were people from all over the world. Matt's Australian. Brett is British, but a lot of the people there were from all over, Spain and whatever. And Trevor he was there before me, but only by maybe months. So we both were just kind of getting into it and didn't really know what we were doing. And when I first started like designing with other people, it was actually with Chris Marling, who I designed Armageddon with.
Okay.
But not long after that, I started working closely with Trevor, and we worked together ever since.
Oh wow, that's awesome. So, how many different games are you designing at one time? I mean, is it 3? Is it 4? I mean, how many do you have going at once typically?
If you include basically anything up until the point where it's not yet published, right? Yeah. So there are games that are like General Orders is done. I'm not doing anything with it. It just hasn't come out yet.
Right.
But if you include those, it's usually like maybe 8 to 10, or in some state of like I'm working on it, right? Or it's not yet published, right? So that the most liberal sort of spectrum you can imagine, it's usually like 8 to 10.
It's interesting.
Now, at any one point, like right now, I probably have about 3 games that I'm very actively focused on, right? Like, I'll wake up and work on one today. Tomorrow, I'm going to work on a different one. Usually, it's like 3-ish, maybe 4 at the most.
Are those games that are already kind of contracted, or those ones that you're hoping to pitch to publishers?
Yeah, so I'm again super blessed. Probably in the last like 3 years or so, I've transitioned to, because this is not my full-time job, right? And I have a family. You have to manage your time very carefully because it's very finite, right? And so I don't really have the luxury, and this is going to sound weird, of working on games that are not on contract. And so that's a mixed blessing. That's a mixed blessing because I get frustrated because all the time I'm like, oh, what about this idea? That would be awesome, but I don't have any time to work on it. I mean, I won't go into details, but Trevor and I met with Osprey recently and planned out the schedule for like the next few years, right? And it's just insane. Like if you just the games work on for them, it'll keep me busy. That's not to say any of the other stuff.
So, oh wow.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was reading your Battle of Britain designer's diary, and you said it took 2 years. It took about 2 years from the initial pitch to when gamers got the game in their hands. Is that a typical time frame for from start to finish for a design? Or
yeah, sort of cliche answer is there's no typical time frame, and that's true, right? Like so, something like Undaunted Normandy took. I started in 2014. It was published in 2019, so that's 5 years. But then you can have something like Resist or Witchcraft. Like Witchcraft, we started working on basically at the very end of last year, early this year, and it will be out this year.
Oh, wow.
It depends on so many things, like whether it's a game that will eventually be pitched versus a game that a publisher, came to us and said, hey, we wanted you to do something for us, and the materials of the game and how, the artist's availability, all of those things. And whether it's a publisher that does development themselves, all of those things will factor. But I would say, generally speaking, 2 years is about a good average for that.
About average. Interesting. Cool.
But what it really means, and this happened to me this past weekend, I was meeting with a buddy to play games, and we were going to play General Orders. And so I had to play with my daughter first to remind myself how to play the game, because it's been, a year plus since I played the game, right?
And you actually designed it. That's funny.
The tricky is some of it's genuinely forgetting the rules, but usually it's you can't remember which version of the rules ended up in the final version. Right.
So of the designs that you can talk about, what was your most favorite one to design? Or which one did you?
Stuff that's already come out.
Yeah.
Right? So 2 games stand out to me, not because of the game itself. One is Undaunted Normandy, just because it got a very strong personal attachment to me. My family ties and stuff like that to it. And then the other one's War Chest, and that's mostly just because my kids. Now I say that I'm going to have to caveat this in a second. War Chest, because that's what I play with my kids the most, especially my son. But then I have this game Dire Alliance that was with Blacklist that may never actually be published. So we'll see. But
a Kickstarter that hasn't fulfilled, right?
It may never fulfill, right? But they did. But they airshipped me. Or whatever. Somehow they mailed me. They mailed me a copy of the base game and the miniatures that were designed for the base game. None of the like Kickstarter or stretch goal expansion stuff. And the idea at the time was that I would film some videos and share it and stuff like that, right? But my daughter fell in love with it. Like she loves it. It's her favorite game. And so it's crushing because if the game never gets fulfilled, like all the backers will be screwed. I won't talk about my personal ties to it and all of that. We won't go into the gory details. The thing that will be crushing to me is that my daughter's favorite game, she asks me all the time, she's like, Daddy, will we ever get the expansions? I want to play with the other factions. And I'm like, no. I don't know. They're all sitting in China, and they may never come.
Oh no.
Yeah, but those. So that's the answer to the question. Those are my favorite games because of those reasons, right? In terms of like what's fun to play, just purely just for that purpose alone, it's difficult to say. I really had a lot of fun with Trevor working on General Orders. That was cool. That came together quickly, and we always enjoyed playing it. So now that's some recency bias, probably.
Looking forward to that one. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, we'll see if people dig it. It's always that, like, you get super worried, like, nobody's going to like the game, or it's going to be riddled with errors, right? One of those two things, or both.
I think that about every time I put out a podcast episode, and I don't know. I'm not making any money off of that or anything, but I get super nervous. Like, are people going to like this? Is there going to be a glaring audio error that I left in? So I can understand that a little bit on a different scale.
Yeah.
Any creative ever probably has that going for it. So
yeah. And it never gets better. It never gets easier or better. It never goes away. Just always worried.
Right. Yeah, Stalingrad, Undaunted Stalingrad. I'm about 9 scenarios into that campaign. It has been one of the best gaming experiences I've had in a long time. It's a fantastic game. I'm excited to finish it up. So this is your first kind of large-scale campaign style game, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I've done a couple of things that are much, much smaller scale. Yeah, and nothing even came close to this. And I kind of wish, I can't get into too much of the details, but in the last couple of years, I've been working with Dave Neal, who has worked on things like Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. So he's very much lives in the world of narrative games. And I've learned so much from him, just both in like his design approach and also software he uses to track some of the narrative branching, like pieces of it. Because I didn't have that when we were working on Stalingrad. And one of my tasks that I took on for Stalingrad was specifically the way that all the interconnectivity between the branching with the scenario resolution. And I'm telling you, like, I lost a lot of brain cells. A lot of brain cells died in the making of that game that I'll never get back, because it like fried my brain trying to make sure that it all worked in the end.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up question, right? It's like, what are some of the challenges in designing a game like that? And it sounds like that branching narrative was one of the hardest parts of it. Anything else that was difficult about a campaign style game like that?
Well, there were 2 challenges that were somewhat related. One was the branching narrative. Like, how do we control the narrative? How, what's going to be the pieces that are tracked by it? How do we make it opaque to the players to the point where you don't know exactly what's happening, but not so opaque that you don't, like, you should know, like, oh, I've won most of the battles for Stalingrad, so I'm winning, quote unquote winning. I don't know exactly what's going on in the background, but I know I'm doing better than I thought, right?
Yeah.
That was a piece of it. And then the other piece that the game is doing in the background is trying to maintain balance between the players, right? And so it's doing double duty. Like, it's tracking like the big sort of picture of who's winning, and then it's tracking like, okay, that's an independent variable who actually needs help in the sort of like balance scale.
Yep.
Those 2 things are happening simultaneously, and the game has to track all of that with just like a single digit at the time.
Right.
And so that was definitely a challenge. And then of course, like, okay, cool. The Germans are up 7-2. Clearly, the Soviets need some help. How can we provide them help in a way that doesn't feel cheesy to the German?
Yeah, right.
Like, why am I being penalized for doing well? So all of that had to, and who knows if we were successful, but we did our best, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, I've been having a blast with it. I think it's very successful, and like I said, we're excited to finish it up. So I'm playing with Mark. He's been on the show a few times, and he'll have, I'm sure, a lot to say about it as well. So, yeah.
I'm playing with my son. 6 scenarios in. He is up 4-2, which is both a humbling and proud moment. But I've taken out all of his snipers. They're all dead. They're all removed from the game. So I'm hoping things are going to start shifting my direction.
Yeah. The thing that I can't remember, I was listening to a podcast today where they were talking about it. And what I think I like most about it is, in that podcast, they were talking about the influence of the snipers. And I hope I'm not spoiling anything for you guys. The engineers with smoke grenades, right? I don't know if you guys have had those show up yet. But it's like, there are entire campaigns that people will never get those, right? Like, they'll never experience it. And I think that's cool. I think that there's some shared experiences, and there's some unique experiences that if you were to sit down at the end and say, oh, wow, we never even saw that.
That's awesome, because that adds to the replayability, right? You can reset the campaign and just go for it again, maybe play the other side and then experience a different thing, right? So I think that's great.
Yeah, I'm definitely planning on once we finish it, replaying and swapping sides. So I'm looking forward to that, and it's awesome that you can do that. Reset it. It's not like some legacy games where it's one and done, and you're tearing up stuff, right? So that's awesome.
On the wall, and then that's it.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, that was the original intent. That was the original sort of pitch from Osprey, right?
yeah,
And thankfully, we all like Trevor and I were always kind of uneasy about it, and we kind of pushed back a couple of times, and they were a little bit reluctant. And at the end, they were like, "No, we're going to make it resettable campaign."
That's great. Let's talk about Battle of Britain a little bit. First of all, thank you for the copy of Battle of Britain. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Tyler and I were able to play a few scenarios when he got back from Origins, and from the get-go, it had a different feel from the standard Undaunted, but it was amazing. We played 2 scenarios and had a blast for both of them. And what was most different about it was, I think, the movement, right? So simulating dogfighting. So how quickly did that come together for you, designing that different movement system in Battle of Britain?
Yeah. So we knew, so in terms of like it being different, we knew, and I've said this before in different places, each game in the Undaunted series has to have a reason to exist, right? It's not like a reskin or whatever. Right? And most of that's for me and Trevor for our mental health, so that we're not just like mind-numbingly churning out the same thing. Like it has to be interesting.
Yeah, right.
different scenarios with a new skin.
Yeah,
right. Because we're going to be playing it literally hundreds and hundreds of times, so it better be not horrible. So I think I have a bad memory, but in general, like the tempo and the health and stuff of the planes, that all came together because it's all already sort of baked in. I think very early on we knew it was going to be a hex board and we were going to have directional facing and all of that. So that was pretty much it. Now the place that we tried early on to make altitude relevant, like should altitude play a role in it? It is a World War II aerial combat game. Should it have a role? And so that's something that we played around with for quite a bit. And then there's been a couple of interesting. That has not been a point of like massive debate and discussion in the sort of community of people that are playing it. What has popped up, and it'll be interesting to see if you guys have run into this yet, is if you remove all the cards of a plane, the plane is just going to sit on the board until it's either destroyed or, it just sits there, right? Yeah. So it's like a helicopter hovering. And so, quite a few people have raised that issue. They're like, hey, why is a plane just hovering in space? And the real answer is, well, we thought about that, right? Because the whole, like in general, the game gives you this constant sense of motion, right? Because you have to move on your turn. And so we struggled quite a bit with like, okay, well, every time you shuffle your deck, do we require you to move a plane or, all of these different things? So it's just going to be like a rules overhead kind of burden. And then finally we just decided, we're just going to abstract it away and say it's something we're willing to accept, right? That it's quote unquote unrealistic, but so is rolling a 10-sided die to attack another.
Sure.
So it's going to be okay.
Right.
Like the world will continue to move. But the real thing when people bring it up is the problem with, even if we said like, oh, we're going to change the fact that like when you remove your last card, the plane will come off the board to try to quote unquote deal with the problem. First, it causes issues where you have to know how many cards were everywhere. So you have to deal with that. But even then, it doesn't solve the quote unquote problem, because you could have a single plane sit on the board with one card in your deck. And every single time that card comes up, you could just play it for initiative. So the plane would still just sit there. Right?
Yep.
And so we just finally said, this is Undaunted. This is not a simulation. We're trying to play a fast game in 30 minutes, so.
I love that you kept it the way that it is and that you didn't add something else to try and control that or negate that. And I have had that happen, and we've joked about it like, oh, it's a helicopter.
Yeah.
I mean, and I kind of think of it like when all of the cards have been wiped out and the plane is just there not moving, you really, I mean, from a situational awareness back at base, you've lost contact and you have no idea where that plane is. So it's lost at sea. So that's kind of what I picture in my mind.
And I mean, and I don't mean this flippantly, like genuinely, there are a lot of World War II aerial combat games. And if you want something that's more realistic, right, or simulationist or whatever, there's a lot of genuinely good choices, right? And so it's one thing that we tried to do early on was say, well, what are we providing? Why do we need to make an aerial combat game? There's already a bunch of it. What's this going to do that's different? And I think that the thing that I really enjoy, besides the fact that it's quick playing and it's relatively straightforward and stuff, and it's an entry point for people that might be interested in that topic, is the cohesion part of the planes, right? Their squad comms, their section comms card, and keeping the planes together. I haven't, and I'm sure that there exists. So somebody will correct me. I haven't seen a ton of games, aerial combat games, that really focus on that.
Yeah, I love that aspect of it, and how that replaces the scout and fog of war, which doesn't make sense with aerial combat. I love how that's done, and there's times within the game where it's like, okay, I could split these two fighters up, but I'll pay for it later, but I'm going for it, So I love that. That it's just another decision to, is it worth it for me to add a Discord card or two in the future to the deck to take this move now? So with Stalingrad, I can't imagine from a design perspective that will ever see a solo version of the game. That just seems like a nightmare. Maybe it can be done by a solo game design master out there named David Thompson. But is there anything planned for Battle of Britain?
So there's not anything planned. Now here's the thing that's interesting. Bring up David Thompson. He and David Digby did the one for reinforcements, right? And so here's the interesting thing about when they created the solo system for reinforcements. They created this extremely however you want to detailed, whatever you want to call that solo system, because it's specific to each faction in the series, right? And so it's amazing, it's fantastic, it's great. But in a way, it set them up for a situation where it can't possibly exist in Stalingrad, right? Because there's no way, after scenario one, there's no way for you to know what units you have available to you, what stats they're in, any of that stuff. And so the only sort of conceivable solo system that you could possibly have is something that's very different. And it's kind of like, I call it one step removed from playing multi-hand or two-handed solitaire, right? Where you're just playing both sides. And at that point, start to question whether it's even a solitaire system. And players would get, if you said, hey, here's a system, and you're like, actually, you're just playing it one solo, two-handed, whatever. So for Stalingrad, yeah, we basically said, hey, this is too much. Now, it's kind of the similar thing with Battle of Britain, right? Because when you play Undaunted, Normandy, North Africa, when a unit activates, if it's going to do a thing, if it's going to move or shoot or whatever, I mean, you can write a relatively straightforward AI. But if you say that in Battle of Britain, you say, okay, this plane, this hurricane is going to maneuver. Well, I mean, there's an explosion of possibilities that happens, right? With all the different move and maneuver combinations. And so you could say something like, move towards an enemy or something like that. But what does move towards mean? How do you move that way, right? And so ultimately, we decided that it was just too. It was either it couldn't exist in the same sort of system that was already created for reinforcements. It would be a much different experience. But as the fans are ought to do, that there's already a couple of fan-made solo systems on BGG.
Right. So I've played two scenarios of Undaunted Normandy, the solo version, and it immediately just blew me away. The amount of work that went into that was just crazy. I just couldn't believe it. And it's interesting how it says, don't play this first, right? Because it's got a level of complexity that is quite a bit higher than just the normal Undaunted. But that must have been quite the feat to put that together. And I know, were you very involved in that process?
Yeah, not at all. So basically the way it works is I do a lot of solo game design work, right? But when I design a game that's not solo from the start, like Undaunted, I don't like making a solo system. Right? I know that sounds a little weird, but I like to either design a solo game or a multiplayer game. And so with Osprey, from the very beginning, there was a lot of community desire to have a solo system for it. but I told Osprey that, hey, I wasn't really interested in doing this. And so they reached out to David Turksey. And so what essentially happened, and I think this is an accurate sort of generalization of it, is David Turksey sort of conceptualized the general system, but David Digby's the one who actually implemented everything. And so when you see the insane amount of work, the vast majority of that came from David Digby, his work on the system. And then there was also quite a bit of development work by Osprey. But Trevor and I didn't do any of it. We literally were like, just the cheerleaders.
Go for it. Yeah.
Hey, this is awesome.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
So I had literally watched Dunkirk for the first time like a week and a half before I played that scenario of Battle of Britain. And so when I got to it and saw that it was Dunkirk, I was like, oh, this is awesome. Turned on the Dunkirk soundtrack, and that was just fantastic. How much of the scenario, like text and story, I mean, the historical part, do you come up with?
So Trevor and I have sort of informally fallen into roles with our design work, right? So I'm definitely more like the historical guy. I do more of like the scenario conceptualization. Trevor's much more like refinement and development, but then of course we're playing everything together. And so for sure with all the Undaunted games, like all of the locations, the scenario ideas, the background, I'll do all of that. Now for Stalingrad, I would come up with this, like what the scenario was, what was it about, but I would just provide those notes to them so that the lengthy sort of narratives that in the book for Stalingrad was all written by an author they brought in to do it.
Cool.
But in the normal ones with just the sort of paragraph or so of background, I would write all those.
Nice. I just love what that adds to each scenario and the overall Undaunted games. It makes it really fun to learn a little bit, and there's things there that are like, oh, I got to go look up this battle now and check it out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and it's way easier for me to try to come up with a scenario idea with a constraint, right? Like in this case, a real battle. And so it's like, okay, well, how do you model Dunkirk? How do you model this thing, right? It within the context of the game. That's way easier than just saying, just come up with a scenario idea. It could be whatever.
Yeah, I love reading all that flavor text and stuff before. I've been playing Memoir 44 for years and years, and I never skip reading the little paragraph before, right? Just so it kind of sets the stage of what you're doing, and like Tyler said, it kind of triggers interest in maybe reading more up about these battles and looking stuff up. So I really appreciate all of that too. It's really cool.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, Memoir 44 and Advanced Squad Leader are the two things that, like, if you ever have a scenario, a World War II scenario that you want to play, no matter how obscure, there's going to be a Memoir 44 and an Advanced Squad Leader scenario based on it.
Yeah.
So it's awesome.
Nice. So is Trevor still in England, or
no? He and his family live in Ely, right outside of Cambridge. Yeah.
Okay. And so when do you find the time to meet up with him? I mean, is that late evenings or early mornings for you, or how do you find the time in general, I guess?
Yeah. So fortunately he's willing to stay up kind of late and I get up super early. And so we meet usually twice a week. We'll meet on Sunday afternoons, my time, which is Sunday night for him. And then also Tuesday, same thing, right after work for me and like sort of night for him. And then I wake up. So that's the only time I really do design work, not in the mornings, is when I'm meeting with Trevor, occasionally somebody else to work on testing. Otherwise, I usually wake up about 3:30 or 4 and work until I go to work. And so on Thursdays, we'll do that. I'll get up super early Thursday, and he works from home Thursdays. But yeah, we are very, very similar in that we both it's not our job, but we both take it very seriously, and we have scheduled time. Yeah. We hold ourselves
nice
and treat it seriously.
Well, I think that's probably one of the reasons why you've been so successful. So that's awesome. It's great.
Well, I love co-designs, and there's tons and tons and tons of positives for co-designing, but really probably the single most important thing is it helps me hold myself accountable. If somebody else is relying on you to do something, it's a lot easier to get it done.
Absolutely.
So what what's next for Undaunted then? Can you give us inside scoop on anything?
Oh,
To heard it first here.
I bet he can't.
I will tell you. I will tell you this. Osprey. This is amazing. I think I may have told you guys this before we chatted, but Osprey runs an extremely tight ship when it comes to scheduling, right, which is fantastic. So we're usually a couple of years ahead, right? So like, Battle of Britain's been done for a year and a half from a design perspective. So we've essentially finished the next two Undaunteds. I can't tell you what they are.
Awesome.
So we're starting to think about one that's like three ahead of where we are now in the Undaunted storyline. But as it has been thus far, it's very different than anything that's going forward. It's probably the most different.
Cool.
Wow.
We're on the edge of our seat.
Yeah, I'm always looking up your designer page on BGG and looking to see if there's any new games attached to your name yet. We're always looking forward to new games from you. So switching gears a little, I haven't played this. Sniper Elite, right? It's a pretty big IP game. How was that different designing an IP game versus designing from scratch? Did it have its own added challenges, or I guess what was different about it?
Yeah. So that's a funny story. So, Rebellion is the company that makes. Rebellion's a UK company. They have I think they have TV shows, comic books, and all kind of stuff, right? But I mean, they're probably best known for their video games. And so Rebellion was going to stand up a board game division, right? And so they hired a guy, Duncan Malloy, who was the guy who stood up Osprey's board game. And so when he took that job, obviously he knew me because he was the one who signed Undaunted. And so he sort of reached out to me on Twitter cryptically and was like, "Hey, if you were to design a game about a sniper, what would it be like?" And we went back and forth with some Twitter messages. And finally, he revealed that he was obviously looking for somebody to do work on Rebellion properties for their board games. And so I was like, "Oh yeah, let me think about it for some time, and I'll come back to you." And I think like a day or two later, I sent him like, "This is kind of what I would think, a hidden movement game or whatever."
Just a day or two.
Well, no, not the gameplay, but just like the pitch, right? Like, oh yeah, it would be a one versus many, hidden movement game, blah blah blah. But that day, I watched a ridiculous amount of Sniper Elite. Like people will record themselves playing video games and it's on YouTube or whatever. But I would just watch people play Sniper Elite on YouTube. But my buddy Roger, the co-designer for the game, we worked together in the UK. He's American. We worked together there. We were part of the same group, and he would play test stuff for me. But he's a huge hidden movement game player. That was his thing. And so I was like, oh, well, obviously I'll ask my buddy Roger to work with it. But the funniest thing about it all is I had not played a video game since like PlayStation 1. So I had to go buy an Xbox and I had to go buy the game to play the game so that I could make a game about the game. Right? But I mean, in many ways, like it was, not so much Undaunted because Undaunted is inspired by history, but some of my solitaire war games are very, very, very like deeply rooted in the history. And so it was similar from that. Like we played countless hours of Sniper Elite. We were not designing the game at all. We would just go play tons of Sniper Elite. And then we'd get together and kind of deconstruct the experience. Like, okay, how did you feel? What do you think the most important things? What do we have to evoke in the game? And so we just did a bunch of those types of discussions and then kind of started designing the game.
Nice. And if you could pick, what IPs would you like to work on in the future?
Oh man, I would work on G.I. Joe for free. Like I might pay Renegade to let me work on G.I. Joe. I've asked Renegade like multiple times. I'm like, please, I want to make this G.I. Joe game. Please let me make a game for you.
Awesome.
So, but that would be awesome. I mean, there's a few like, do you guys are about my age. Did you watch the Transformers animated movie ever? Have you ever sin it?
Mid-'80s?
Yeah. Okay, so there's a scene like the beginning of that movie is like all the Autobots, all the good guys are on Earth and they're defending their city from the bad guys attacking it. And I remember that whole thing. And I'm like, I want to design a game about that. So there's a couple of like very, very specific, things that I would love to design.
I'll be first in line to buy that one. You on board with that, Tyler?
Yeah. Let's see. So what else can you tell us about General Orders? You're that's coming out this fall, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's set to officially release its Spiel, but there'll be right now the plan is to have early copies for sale and preview at Gen Con.
Awesome.
Okay.
So yeah, and I'll be at Gen Con. I'm going to be there the entire time at the Osprey booth demoing General Orders.
Great.
There was a time. This is probably when I was living in the UK, where Trevor had this idea. He was like, "Hey, what if you mashed up this idea and this idea?" It was two totally random things, just like pick a mechanic and a theme or something like that. Smash them together. What kind of game did you get? What'd you get? It was like a thought experiment. We would talk about it. So General Orders, what essentially happened was, I'm a huge fan of short, tense, card-driven games like CDGs, like proper CDGs in the sort of Twilight Struggle vein, like so a very specific thing, right? It has points and events and that kind of stuff. And so games like Watergate or 13 Days, those kind of games I love. Absolutely love those. And so I was like, I should make a game like that. But the ones that exist already are so good that like, I don't know, I'm not going to improve what's already come before. So I was trying to think of like, I want that 30-minute experience, this sort of, war theme, but not a war game, or like a Euro style game. Super tense from the moment it begins to the moment it ends. And then I was like, how can I achieve that? And so the idea of like, okay, well, let's smash up what would worker placement or game, what would that be like? Right. And that was sort of the origin of General Orders. Right. So it's this, when we were designing it, it was a very strange, like left-right boundary of what was acceptable in the design, because Trevor and I would always have this conversation about, well, if we do this, if we add this rule or this mechanic or whatever, is it still a worker placement game? And we had this strange, weird conversation that we've never had in any other time, where we wanted it to retain that sort of like DNA of being a worker placement game and a war game.
Cool. Sounds awesome.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Who knows? The jury's out.
Sounds amazing. So definitely one that I'll be checking out for sure.
Yeah, I'll be heading to the booth when the Gen Con doors open.
Yeah, I'll be there as well for sure.
Night Witches. You want to talk about that at all? Anything you could share about that?
Yeah, we can talk about it. So Night Witches. So I've got a long list of topics that I'd like to design a game. Right, and Night Witches was on that list for a long time, for a few years. I had a list of topics that I am still interested in, and it's basically like women of World War II, right? So it's like all of the things that women did in World War II that we've largely forgotten because, sometimes women are written out of history. Like, the war's over. We don't need women anymore. Let's kick them out of the military, right, or whatever. And so, I mean, when you look back at it, they did some phenomenal things, right? So we had like AAA operators on the British side. You had, the Wrens. There's this long list of amazing things that women did during World War II. One of the craziest were there's 3 regiments of Soviet pilots, right? And there was a day bombing unit, a fighter unit that was flying like defensive caps mostly, and then the night bomber. And so the Night Witches are probably the most famous of those. They achieved guards status in the Soviet military, which is like, that's a big deal. You don't just get guard status for nothing. And it's because they flew just a ridiculous number of. And so, so it's this, that's what the game is about. These women, it was a pilot and a navigator in a little biplane, like a little crop dusting biplane.
Yeah.
That would go out and conduct night bombing raids. And they would do it. This is crazy. On winter nights, right? So like long nights, they could fly as many as 14 sorties in a single night.
That's crazy.
So they would go and they would bomb and they would come back and recover and do it again and because they were like 30 minutes from the front line, so they could just quick turn the plane. So it was on the list, right? It was on the list of things I wanted to do, and Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire. She's like I call her my gaming BFF, right? She's also an early riser, so we spend a lot of time chatting back and forth in the morning. So I should be working on game design. we just started about, we were talking about it for a while, and we were like, okay, well, let's do this together. And so she and I we just started working on it, and we clicked instantly, right? We were already really good friends, but from a design perspective, we clicked instantly. We had a lot of the same like design ethos and goals in mind, and so it went really, really fast. And then when we went to Circle DC, which was a convention hosted by Fort Circle Games, who's the publisher of like Shores of Tripoli and Votes for Women, we kind of already knew that Kevin, the owner, was interested in the idea of the game, but we demoed it there for the first time, and he signed it. So it's probably like late this year, early next year. It'll be
nice. Well, I'm excited to check that one out. That's another one that when I saw it attached to your name, I went to like their wiki page and I started reading about the individual pilots, and I was just blown away. Like, some of them shot down and survived, just how they were honored. A lot of them lived to be really old ladies, and it was just fascinating to read about their stories. So
yeah, I'm excited to check this one out too. I have 3 girls, so this one really kind of intrigues me to play a war game with my daughters. Women in the military did amazing things. It's just that's cool, and it's great that there's a game out there, or there will be a game out there that highlights that. So that's really cool. I like that.
Yeah, and that's one thing that Liz and I wanted to make sure that it's a game, because you can play it either solo or 2-player co-op, right? And so we wanted to be a game that is so like it's going to be low complexity, right? Because it'll probably be on the level of Undaunted in terms of like historical inspiration, right? Rather than like some sort of historical model. But having said that, actually earlier today, Liz and I met with Raina Pennington, who's she was a professor at Norwich. She basically literally wrote the book on the Night Witches, right? And we've been talking to her nonstop. And so we'll check in with her and say, hey, this is what we're thinking. Does this make sense? Or is this a little, standish or whatever? So we're trying to do right by the memory of the Night Witches.
Nice. So I have one last question. So a lot of your games are historical, geopolitical. Witchcraft branches off into fantasy a little bit. Is that, do you see yourself branching into some more fantasy games in the future, or other genres?
And so I mentioned this sort of in passing earlier when I mentioned Dave Neal, right? Works on narrative games, and we're working together on a narrative war game right now. And for better or worse, I've sort of become this like, people think of me as like a World War II designer. Like, they'll come to me now and they'll be like, hey, I want to commission a game about World War II. And so it's like some of it's like, no matter what I want to do, I don't think I could get away from the war games. But I mean, military history is a true passion of mine, right? So like, there's going to be a natural intersection of the two of those things most of the time. Witchcraft was obviously born of Resist, and Resist is about, post World War II liberation of Spain from Franco, right? Mm-hmm. So Witchcraft was a sort of natural evolution of how do we take that game and change it with some interesting mechanical ideas, but also bring it to a different audience, right? So that was a conscious decision. I think that if given the choice, I probably would you can spend some time working on this sort of political, historical, military, whatever game, or like a fantasy game. I'd probably stick with the historical piece, generally speaking, unless it's like G.I. Joe, as we've discussed.
There's a few caveats.
Exceptions, but I mean, and not, yeah, and I love working on everything, but that's like a good intersection of two different interests. That's kind of my natural.
Awesome.
Well, thanks for taking the time. This was amazing. No, we appreciate you. Talking about all your games, and hopefully our listeners enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
I would talk for a couple more hours, but I know it's getting late there. But we appreciate you being on here, and look forward to seeing you at future cons and hopefully playing some games. And already I've had so much fun playing the games that I have of yours. So
we'll stop by the Osprey booth and say hi at Gen Con for sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, guys. This has been great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Have a good night. All right, so that wraps up the interview with David Thompson. We hope you enjoyed that. We look forward to hopefully doing more of these types of things in the future, interviewing designers and publishers.
Yeah, I mean, we started off on the Origins recap episode with some interviews with publishers, and I think we're going to be doing a little bit more of that. So, yeah, hopefully it's a good thing. Leave a note in our Discord if you like it.
Yeah. All right, so now we're going to jump into the review portion of our episode. Normally we do games we've been playing lately. We skip that and replace that with the interview. Now we're going to get into the feature review. Normally we're focused only on one game when we do feature review episodes. This one's a little different. We're going to talk about each Undaunted game. So we've got Normandy, North Africa, Reinforcements, Stalingrad, and Battle of Britain.
Yep.
Kevin's going to give us a rules overview, the very base rules for.
Yeah, so we'll go over Undaunted Normandy. So there's slight variations based on the game that you're playing, but I'll do a kind of an overview of Undaunted Normandy, and it'll give you just an idea of how all of them play.
For the base system, right?
And then we'll talk a little bit more in depth about each game in particular, and maybe some of the differences as we do our review and give our thoughts on the games. But the review will be for Undaunted Normandy, or the rules will be for Undaunted Normandy.
Okay, and then we'll give our final rating for the overall system, and then rank the games in order of the ones that we've played.
Let's do it.
All right, so we're gonna turn over the mic time to Kevin for the rules overview.
Undaunted Normandy is designed by David Thompson and Trevor Benjamin. It's published by Osprey Games with art done by Roland McDonald. It's the summer of 1944, and the Allies have landed in Normandy. Now you must lead your platoon forward as you push deeper into France to gain a foothold and drive back the German forces. You will face intense resistance, machine gun fire, and mortar bombardment, and it's up to you to turn the situation to your advantage. Take charge amidst the chaos of battle, hold fast in the face of opposition, and remain undaunted. In Undaunted Normandy, you are in command of a rifle platoon striving across a series of missions to claim and hold key objectives. Each scenario will have a different landscape of tiles, which you will have to master in order to claim the objectives and gain advantageous positions. You will be playing cards from your personal deck to control your units, but as casualties mount, you will have to acquire new cards to reinforce your dwindling forces. Play of Undaunted takes the form of a series of rounds, during which both players will play cards to move units, attack the opposing forces, and grab objectives. Each round consists of the following three phases: draw cards, determine initiative, and player turns. Once the last phase has been completed, the round is over and the next round begins. This continues until a player has won. Before the game starts, players will build their starting deck based on the scenario that they are playing. Decks will include a platoon sergeant, platoon guides, squad leaders, riflemen, scouts, and a number of other units. Decks will also include Fog of War cards. Fog of War cards represent the breakdowns in communication caused by the chaos of battle, made worse by enemy deception tactics and by spreading the platoon over a large area. Fog of War cards can't be used for anything except to bid for initiative. Players draw 4 cards from their deck to start the round. From those 4 cards, each player will select one to determine initiative for the round. All cards will show an initiative number in the upper left corner of the card. Initiative cards are placed face down and then revealed. The player with the higher number wins the initiative and starts the round. In the case of a tie, the player that already has the initiative keeps it. The player with the initiative plays cards from their hand one at a time into a play area in front of them. Once they have no more cards in their hand that they can or wish to play, their turn ends. All cards left in their hand and all cards in the play area are moved into that player's discard pile. The player without the initiative then takes their turn in the same way. Each card played can be used to do one of the following card actions. Choose one of the listed actions and perform it in full, or hunker down, return the card to your supply. Card actions include movement actions, support actions, and combat actions. Movement actions will allow you to move around the board in various ways depending on the unit played. Support actions will allow you to take cards from your supply and add them to your deck, draw more cards, remove Fog of War cards from your deck or add them to your opponent's deck, control areas, target enemy forces, or inspire your troops. Combat actions will allow you to attack, suppress, or blast your opponent. To perform a combat action, you follow 4 steps. Step 1 is choosing a target. Once a target is selected, the defense value of the target is determined. The base defense of the unit is added to the cover bonus and range bonus of the target, if any. Step 3 is rolling the attack dice. The number of dice rolled is equal to the number on the combat action. If any of the dice are equal to or higher than the defense value, the attack is successful. Step 4 is determining casualties. To determine casualties, the attacked player must find a card from the attacked combat counters unit and remove it from the game. The player will first check their hand. If the card is not in their hand, they search the discard pile. If the card is not in their discard pile, they check their draw pile. If the card is not in their draw pile, their combat counter for that unit is removed from the board. Each scenario in the scenario book specifies the victory condition each side must reach. As soon as the condition is reached, the game ends immediately without completing the round. The possible victory conditions are capturing objectives or pinning your opponent's forces. Pinning your opponent's force requires you to remove all of their rifleman combat counters from the board. So that's a quick rundown of how to play. Let's get back to the table to see what we thought of Undaunted.
Thanks, Kevin, for the rules summary of Undaunted Normandy. Mark, which ones have you played?
So we played Stalingrad.
I think we're at scenario 9 at this point in Stalingrad. So we've been playing it for a few months. Summer's gotten pretty busy. I wish we were through the whole thing, but yeah, it's schedules got busy. But we're through episode 9 or scenario 9. Yeah.
So we'll get to Stalingrad. Kevin, which ones have you played?
I played Normandy, Stalingrad, Battle of Britain, and some reinforcements. So
awesome.
I played this solo, a few solo scenarios that are reinforcements, and then I think we threw in a few cards into one Undaunted Normandy scenario.
We did.
That we played from reinforcements.
Yep.
So, yep.
So I've played all of them. North Africa, I have the fewest plays of, so we'll lightly hit that one. But in our future reviews, we always talk about production after the rules summary. So let's get into that. The production for the Undaunted games.
Yeah, so I'll start. I have no problems at all with the production. So it's very simplistic, right? So you have the chits that represent your platoons on the board or your different units. I think everything is clear. The tiles are big and chunky. Everything fits on the tiles well when you're moving things around. In Undaunted Normandy, everything is bright and colorful. The one thing I will say about Stalingrad is it's a little bit drab, but I'm pretty sure Stalingrad was drab during the war. So it's very thematic, right? But all the tiles kind of blend together a little bit in Stalingrad, a little bit more than they do in Normandy, and maybe Battle of Britain is brighter as well. Although it's just the ocean you're over in a lot of scenarios, right? But I don't have any issues really with the production of it at all. I think it's great.
Yeah, I don't have any issues either. I love the art style.
Yeah.
I love the soldier card, like especially in Normandy, where their individual cards are each a different soldier with a different name and slightly different modified art.
Yep.
The art is beautiful. I love the art and the style. I think it's perfect. I don't know. I just love the production of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Roland McDonald, the artist, just knocked it out of the park for like all of these games. I love the art in all of the games. I think it's great.
I think that the one thing that I noticed is that, the detail is amazing, because even in the scenarios where there's a synopsis that kind of continues to flow, you read about how this scenario is going to play through the lens of the same characters, and depending on how it shakes, that changes, but the story starts there and then you get into the play. And so just between the pieces and the story itself, it does not feel generic in the least. Right?
Yeah.
It's all very specific. Each piece has a relevant purpose. And even though doesn't really ever feel like there's a ton that are in play at any given moment, if you take a step back and look, you kind of get that sense of, man, this is what the war scenario looked like. Look at all these moving pieces and all these different elements. And yes, these are people. It's not just a...
Yeah, it immerses you into the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really does.
It does.
And whenever I play a scenario, if it's in the base Undaunted, if it's in Battle Britain, if it's in Stalingrad, obviously you have that narrative you're reading. But I always read that synopsis to start the scenario because it gives you the historical background. It kind of sets the stage and it gets you in the mood to play that scenario, right? Which I think is awesome. I love that.
I think I mentioned this on a previous episode. I had just watched Dunkirk for the first time.
Yeah.
We're late to the game a month or so ago. And then I played Battle of Britain. And the second scenario is evacuation of Dunkirk. And I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah, it's so cool.
And that is such a good scenario. And it was so much fun. And I love the focus on the scenario text or the battle description. And and it's fun to go look those up afterwards and go read about them and just learn more. I love history. I love World War II. Incredible stuff. Incredible.
It's fascinating.
There's people doing terrible things, but people also doing incredible things.
Incredible things against all odds, right?
Right.
And I've been doing this for years. Like Mark and I, I've talked about Memoir 44 for a long time. And Mark and I have been playing Memoir 44. And even before I was playing with Mark, I was playing with Matt and my brother-in-law. And it has the same thing. It's got the synopsis before. And I've done that where I'm like, well, this is really cool. And then I go and look that up, like you mentioned, Tyler. And it gives you enough where it spurs you into learning more about it, which is really cool. So Undaunted, the whole system does that as well.
That was one of my takeaways too, where I thought that the detail and the production and the storyline that all went into it is enough to where if you had no baseline understanding of the historical, events, right? You could play it at the first time and all of a sudden think, man, I didn't know that. Maybe I am more interested in this than I thought. And I mean, that's a credit to the publishers, right? They did a great job there.
And playing Normandy makes me want to go watch Band of Brothers.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Right. I mean, you got this incredible unit just plowing its way through Europe and being a key part of many battles and experiences that happened after D-Day, right? And I don't know. It just makes me want to go watch Band of Brothers. So
so I think as a whole, it really does immerse you into the game. The art style, the production itself with the chits and the tiles, the narrative that goes along with it. I think they did a really good job packaging that together and making a good game that really sucks you in. So
what I like too about it is, on the production side is that the board itself evolves as it goes, and the way that they created the pieces to change and move without just consuming a massive amount of table space was done really smartly. Like that was really well organized, really well thought out. You still have a ton in front of you, but the action is all focused into a smaller area. So you can digest and get into it and kind of figure out how to do without, too much overhead.
Yeah.
That made it a lot more enjoyable because you could get into it quicker and instead of have to worry about a million different things that are spread all over the table.
Yeah. And the way that they designed it as well, where the initial scenarios, they're pretty basic, right? They're pretty easy.
Yeah.
We're getting a little bit into gameplay here, but they designed it well there where it goes, it scales well to ease you into it.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Yeah. I will say, you are shuffling these. It's a deck builder. You're shuffling these cards a lot.
Yep.
It's a game that, I sleeve my games. Kevin sleeves his games.
You gotta sleeve it.
You need to sleeve this game.
Tyson, you're not on this episode, but you'll listen. You gotta sleeve it.
Right. You gotta sleeve them. I have had to make some modifications to trays or inserts to be able to get my cards in there.
Yes,
Battle of Britain was rough. My reinforcements box, which now holds all of Normandy and all of North Africa, is very crammed in there. So there is just a tiny ding there, but I mean that's really nitpicky.
That is nitpicky, but that does drive me nuts.
Yeah,
because if you're going to take the time to make a good insert, and the reinforcements box is great,
it is
right. It's got spots for everything, but when you sleeve the cards, it doesn't quite fit. So
some of the corners on the sleeves get a little bent, and
publishers have to know that gamers a lot of them sleeve the cards. So and it wouldn't be that much extra work just to make a little more space in there. Right?
So for the Battle of Britain, I cut the tray. So I've still got the portion that holds all the tiles. And they're hexagons. They're not squares like all the other Undaunteds. And then the other half of the box is just bagged sleeved cards. Yeah. So
I mean, this obviously doesn't affect gameplay at all, but it's just a little, Yeah, I agree with that.
But I love the art. I love the combat counters. Everything just it leads you to that immersion into the experience. I think.
Yeah.
I think I might go on a limb here and say, even for this one, I think Tyson would be a fan of sleeving these because...
No, never.
Hear me out.
Okay. All right.
Each of these cards is a different person, right? That you either good things or bad things happen. You got to take care of these people. Like you get pulled into it and you're like, this gunner cannot go down. I got to take care of this guy because I'm going to need him. And if the card gets destroyed, then...
Yeah, got to sleeve him.
When you put a name and a face to that...
And
a little more invested.
I like this argument. I think maybe Tyson will be swayed.
You got to take care of those. This is getting into gameplay a little bit, but anytime there's a casualty, we read the name.
And, absolutely.
Gunter was a great rifleman.
Mark and I do that. We do that in Stalingrad, right?
Yeah, like it's just part of the experience. Oh man,
he fought well.
He got off some nice sniper shots,
or he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn.
Yes, right.
Nice shot, Wolfgang. This is why you now have a shovel instead of a rifle.
So that's awesome. So I think that anything else on production before we move on to kind of overall gameplay?
I think we've
what
covered
we like and dislike.
I think it's great. Yeah, no issues at all.
All right. What do you guys like about the Undaunted system?
So the first thing that comes to mind for me is the whole initiative concept, right? So as I explained in the rules, you draw 4 cards, and then on those cards, there's an initiative value. The higher the initiative, the more powerful the card is. The lower the initiative value, you go down to Fog of War and it's a 1, right? That's a worthless card. So you draw those cards, and initiative can be so important in this game because you go first, you play all of your cards, you can, wipe out your opponent and take cards from their hand. So that decision of, holy cow, I have my platoon sergeant, I really want to bolster some cards and bring them into my deck. I've got 2 Fog of War, which were worth nothing. Like, do I play my platoon sergeant or do I play my Fog of War? That decision is agonizing at times. And it's just so fun. And when you're right and you pick the right one, it's like, yes. And then when you're wrong, it's like, he played a Fog of War and I got rid of my platoon sergeant.
Yes.
It's like, dang it.
But total overkill.
Yeah, overkill. But I really wanted to do what I wanted to do. I love that decision. It makes for moments in the game that are, all throughout the game that are awesome.
I think it's fantastic. And it's especially important because I don't know how many games I've played where the winning round came down to initiative and who went first.
More often than not.
Yes. Yeah. Mark and I have talked about that multiple times. It's like initiative is so important, right? And there's been games that we played where you had initiative the whole time. It's like, and I just felt like I was behind the whole time. And then it's, swung the other way on different scenarios that we play. So,
well, it's such a random element too, where, to your point, Tyler, when you get into the heat of the scenario and it really could come down either way, you may feel like, okay, I've got my strategy executed perfectly. I got all my pieces where I need to go. I'm ready to do this. And when you draw, this happened to me, by the way, you have nothing but Fog of War cards and have 0 play.
I had that happen to me in a game with Logan. It came down to the last round and I drew 4 Fog of War cards. And I was like, whoa, this has never happened. It happened on the last turn.
I played with Matt last week, 4 Fog of Wars. I'm like, no.
And it's maddening, but I mean, all you can do is laugh, but you think, how much worse would this game be off if that option didn't exist?
Yeah.
Like, I'm giving up the initiative, but even if I had it, I can't do anything.
Yeah.
I mean, the point that you make, Kevin, about having initiative and how that's such an important thing, it's not just nice to have. I don't know if there's a bigger variable, even amongst the cards that you have in your deck. Like, if you don't have initiative, they are totally neutralized.
Yeah, the other huge variable obviously is the dice rolls, right? And sometimes they can go your way, and sometimes they just don't go your way. That's the other large variable, because you can have initiative and then roll ones.
Yeah, that's true.
And it doesn't even matter. You can get yourself in position for future rounds, obviously, but that's another big variable there, which I don't think is a bad thing for a game like this. I brought up Memoir 44 before. That comes down to die rolls as well, right? Which is great because it gives the opportunity to create awesome moments where you have this improbable roll.
I mean, war is chaos.
Yeah, and war is chaos, right? You have an improbable roll where you do awesome. Your sniper shoots somebody across the map, or you're in the same tile
Point blank.
Point blank,
You can't hit it.
and Gunther can't hit anybody. It makes for funny, and it creates stories as well.
Yeah,
which
it
is cool.
does.
Yeah.
Along with the initiative, something that I love about this system is the pace of play. I feel like the game just moves because you're both laying down an initiative card, then one of you plays 3 cards with very specific actions that they can do, and then the other person goes and does the same thing, and it just flows and moves so well. There are so many times where Logan and I will start playing and we're 5 minutes into it and we're already in the 6th or 7th round of play just because of how fast it moves. And I love that about it.
Yeah. It's very quick playing. Yeah.
Well, the other thing I would say about that too is that the momentum changes so quickly from turn to turn. It seems like more often than not in the scenarios that we've played, someone will get an early lead, at least what it's kind of hard to tell exactly. There's not a scoreboard and such, but it feels like somebody's doing better. And then all of a sudden it's not, and it's really not.
Yeah.
And it can switch back and forth so quickly and so easily that you just never, until it's done, you never really feel like this is really going my way. Like I think it is, but I don't know. And so that intriguing aspect of how am I really doing, it kind of sucks you in, right? Like you want to see it through.
Yeah.
And on top of that, even from scenario to scenario, it's tough to see, okay, I did well in this last scenario, but what does that really mean? Is this going to help me out, or was the price too high to pay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Specifically
really smartly done.
for Stalingrad there, from scenario to scenario, it's hard to know. I think I'm doing good here.
I'm doing terrible against Logan.
But I love, the ebb and flow. We talked about that. So Mark and I played a scenario, and it was the most epic scenario that I've played in Undaunted. It was a long, you talk about the snappy play. This one we were slugging it out for like an hour and a half at least, right? Maybe even longer.
I think it was 2 hours.
It could have been 2 hours.
Most of the scenarios we did for like 45 minutes to an hour. Yeah. But I remember when we kind of read through the scenario or the synopsis at the beginning, it was kind of unlike any of the others. And my first reaction was, oh, this is
mind blown, basically. Yeah.
This is going to be nuts, right? This one is going to be bananas. And it probably took us 2 hours to get through.
Yeah.
And it was exhausting.
It was. It was exhausting, but
it was mentally draining.
Yes. But I bring it up because the story that unfolded was incredible. Right.
Yes.
So there was ebbs and flows, and it's like, I don't know who's going to win, what's going to happen. But there was this narrative that emerged in the story that was, I still have this vivid in my mind what happened, which so cool, so awesome that I didn't care who won, right?
Yeah.
The story that unfolded, Mark had, his tanks that he was doing stuff with, and I had a sniper that was camped somewhere, and it was just so fun and so cool, and it wasn't snappy, it wasn't quick, but it was memorable.
Well, the action was fun.
But
the resolution was
the turns were quick, but the whole scenario itself, it was just a story, a big story in the Battle of Stalingrad, which was really cool. I loved it.
I do love that some scenarios can change on a dime, and then someone pulls out an improbable win.
Yes.
And I'll give an example of this. So I was playing a Normandy scenario with Logan, and I kind of had a turtling type approach. Like I had my snipers, I had the high ground. I needed to go out and get control points, victory points, right? And instead of doing that, I just kind of sat back and just obliterated his army, right? And he needed to pin me, so he needed to get all my riflemen off the board. And it got to the point where he had his platoon sergeant, the 2 squad leaders, and like 1 scout. And so he was just cycling through his 5 cards or 6 cards every single turn. I completely obliterated his army. But then in like 1.5 turns, he got a scout all the way across the board, took out my last rifleman, and won the scenario. And it was just crazy. And it was like, blah, but I wiped out your whole army. I don't know. But it was just kind of one of those epic, heroic scout scenario moments where it created this story where this dude was just a legend, right? It was just awesome.
Yeah, I love it. That's great. And this game, the whole system sets up for moments like that in, almost every game you play. You can envision in your mind some epic moment, some heroic soldier, something happening.
This guy can't hit the broadside of a barn.
Yeah, like somebody's terrible, or your engineer goes and plants a bomb on a tank, or you get yourself in position. It's it's a great system that has a lot of expandability. You can in our interview, David talked about more games that are coming in the Undaunted series, right?
Yeah, I can't wait.
I don't know. He wouldn't tell us what they were.
No,
but he's got 2 of them ready to go, and I want to know. I want to know what they are.
Yeah.
Well, when Kevin and I read the instructions the first time, we got to the part where it talks about how to achieve victory in the scenarios, and there was a rule in there that talks about you can concede.
Yes,
and we talked about it and thought, now, why would you do that? Like, what's the point? Like, this seems evenly. And then after having played a number of the scenarios and seeing, the casualties just mount, right? You think back and like, oh, that's why they have that as an option. Was that worth it? Or was it the foolish pride to keep charging up the hill when that sniper's not missed anything,
So that's specific to Stalingrad, and
it's a decision.
It is.
Because you don't want to lose your guys.
You don't.
But it just feels so counterintuitive, right? Like when you play in a game, you're like, okay, we've already invested this much. Like, no, I'm not going to just walk away. I want to play. Like
there is a chance, dang it, and totally, I want to try.
Yeah.
So do you like that decision?
I do.
Or that it's available.
Well, and I couldn't figure out. Well, I couldn't envision in my mind any scenario in which I would take that as an option. And then looking back and realizing, having not done that and seeing that
all my riflemen are gone.
I can see where
I have one guy left, or
So
maybe I should have.
I'm losing to Logan. We've played 6 scenarios of Stalingrad, so not as many as you guys. I've only won 2 of them, but I've eliminated all of his snipers. They're all dead completely.
Yep. That's huge,
and that's a powerful unit.
Oh yeah,
that I am very excited to see how that plays out with him not having any snipers left.
Yeah, that's a unique part of Stalingrad that I think is super interesting. Yeah.
Should we maybe talk about just some of the differences in the games?
Yeah, let's do it.
So I think for me, Normandy it's the entry level version. It's the most symmetric. It's fantastic. The first 5 or 6 scenarios play really quick. I think the first time I mentioned on the podcast, I was like, oh yeah, each scenario takes like half an hour or less. And then we started, after that episode aired, I started getting into the later scenarios of Normandy. I was like, whoa, this is taking an hour.
It's a little bit
more
beefier.
than an hour. Yeah, they get a little beefier, but initially there's a ramp up there where you're learning the game and the system, and it does a really good job of that.
It eases you into it very well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I'll also give you credit for that, because the first time that you mentioned that, you were so high on that game that I was intrigued, and then Kevin said, hey, we should sit down and start playing this thing. And it was at a time where, like, a really busy time in our schedules where we were trying to figure out how do we get this in. And I kind of had to think, man, do I even have time to do this? Do I want to do this? But okay, based on Tyler's feedback and his endorsement of his experience, I was like, yeah, we should try this. And it hit pretty quick, right? So I appreciated the fact that you had said this would be a great game just to get into and start, even with a baseline first couple of scenarios.
Yeah,
right?
that's awesome.
That was great. Appreciated
Sweet.
that.
I'm glad we've all gone down this path.
Yeah, we're far down the rabbit hole now.
Yes. Normandy has 12 scenarios. I've played through all of them. Fantastic. Love it.
Yeah, I've played through the first 2, and then we played, I don't know which scenario we played.
We played random one.
It was random in there somewhere.
And it was one of those games. Every once in a while.
It didn't go well.
No, every once in a while, there's a game where Lady Luck is just not with you. your dice rolls, they just seem to go all one way.
Yeah.
I don't know how many total scenarios I've played, but it's in the dozens. And I've had 2 or 3 experiences, both for and against, where the rolls are just not there at all.
That may be my single favorite part of the whole game, though, just because
I was going to say that could be seen as a negative for this game, but
because regardless of whether it's in your favor or not, it's just awesome. I mean, you can't. All you can think of, or at least for me, all I can think of is, Leroy Jenkins. This guy go charging in like he's going to make this awesome move, and then completely blows it, and then all of a sudden
on a rock, falls on his face.
Surrounded.
Yeah. I don't know. Did it feel awesome, Kevin?
No, it didn't. It was a little frustrating for me because I couldn't do anything. But that's this game. But you can't get upset about that, right? It's just how it is. It can be very lopsided. I could see how that could be a negative for some people, though. So it's something to be aware of when you're going into this game. It's just you can get obliterated, and it's just the way it is, right? Your strategy could be perfect. You could have the best tactics in the game. You're moving your forces under cover and doing everything you should be doing, and you roll ones every time, right? Yeah. And your opponent rolls, zeros, right? Yeah, so that's just something to be aware of for this type of game.
The flip side of that, something that Logan and I laughed about a lot while we were playing Normandy is, in most of the games, if you roll a 10, regardless if you're 6 tiles away from someone and their defense value and all that's calculated, even if you roll a 10, it's a success, right?
Yeah.
So we were always joking. You got the rifleman who's
aiming up,
the
rainbow shot.
Yeah, the rainbow shot, and every once in a while lands a hit on someone.
Yeah,
and that's just like a cheer out loud moment. But
every once in a while, that's your only option, right?
Yeah,
which makes it really cool.
You can't move your guy. You just have to shoot. It's
let's see what the trajectory of this bullet is, and what we can do. But
that's pretty funny. Yeah, and another thing, the scenarios can be slightly imbalanced, right? That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
I mentioned Memoir 44. They're also imbalanced. You play both sides in that game. You don't really play both sides in this one. That was one of the things I noticed. So they can be a little bit imbalanced, but, just play again type of thing,
Absolutely.
So that could be also seen as maybe a little bit of a negative, but I don't think it is.
I definitely think, Normandy is the most symmetric of all of them.
You think so?
That's the entry level one. The cards are pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Whether you're playing as the Germans or the US. So I think that one's the most symmetric one.
Yeah. So Normandy you got your riflemen, you got your scouts, you got your gunners,
machine gunners, snipers,
and then you got mortars in there as well.
Yeah, they come out in some of the later scenarios, and those are fun to play with too. So
you got a target, and then you had mortars, I think, in the one that we played.
Yeah,
I was pretty sure. And you just that's
I felt bad about picking that scenario. Sorry.
No, I got introduced to mortars. It was great. Yeah, it was just fine. So those are the types of units you can expect in Normandy.
All right, so we move on to North Africa.
Let's do it. I have 0 plays of this one. I know it introduces vehicles, but I think you're going to probably go into that.
Yeah, so this one is the least played among the group. There are 11 scenarios. It does introduce new soldier types and actions. Structures are added.
Nice.
So North Africa is between the Italians and the LDRG, which stands for Long Range Desert Group. And it was comprised of New Zealanders, Southern Rhodesians, British, Scottish, and Indian volunteers.
Awesome.
And a lot of, again, the flavor text or the historical text, right? A lot of their activity was behind enemy lines between 1940 and April 1943. So
cool.
So the LDRG, they have vehicles too. The Italians have big tanks, right? The LDRG are much more mobile, kind of quick, get in, raid, and get out, right? So there's a number of scenarios where there's a couple scenarios where the Italians are just trying to control objectives, and the LDRG are trying to move in and destroy the structures. So if the Italians have controlled it, and then the LDRG comes in and destroys it, the Italians no longer have those objective points.
that's
and
cool.
The LDRG has them, and they can't go back to the Italians.
Oh, yeah.
So a big thing that's added in North Africa is the vehicles.
Is the scale a little bit different?
It is a little different.
Okay, that's what I thought.
The cards themselves represent one soldier.
Okay.
Per unit type. You got the vehicles where you can pile in multiple guys into the vehicles. So Stalingrad has vehicles. Battle Britain obviously has aircraft and anti-aircraft, but you're not piling guys into those cards.
Yeah.
As in the same way.
Yeah.
So you can move these vehicles around. When you play a card that is a soldier that's in one of the vehicles, instead of taking actions on their card, an action on their card, they can take one of the vehicle actions, which is really cool.
Okay, that's cool.
The vehicles can be disabled, they can be repaired, they can be destroyed, you can snag someone else's vehicle. If you can take it over and get all the guys out of there, you can snag a vehicle and start using it and move your guys around in it.
So it sounds like it switches it up quite a bit.
It does.
That's cool. I need to pick this one up for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited to get more plays of this. North Africa did change up something from Normandy. If your combat counter for a unit is knocked off the board, that unit is out for the rest of the game. That is not the case in Normandy. You can always, if you still have cards of that,
you can bolster them back in, and they have spawn points.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's gone in North Africa.
Oh wow, that adds a different strategy for sure.
Yep. It also changed up that you can control a tile even if an enemy combat counter is on that tile, if it isn't already controlled. So in Normandy, you have to eliminate other soldiers on a tile before you can control it.
Right.
So, there's some different changes. The system's starting to evolve a little bit. North Africa is way more asymmetric. Like I said, the Italians are often going after scenario objectives or to kill specific LDRG units. LDRG are trying to destroy structures, escape the board. Sometimes they also are trying to neutralize specific characters. Each scenario is different, but the scenarios are way more asymmetric than in Normandy.
So if the characters have permanent casualties, does it also introduce the upgrade capabilities?
No, it doesn't do that like it does in Stalingrad.
So they're just gone, and when you lose them,
they're just gone for that scenario. You move on to the next
scenario.
Move on to the next scenario, and you have those units back. Whatever's supposed to be in the supply and deck.
Can you play it in a campaign? I think you can play Undaunted Normandy as a campaign.
There are campaign play instructions at the beginning of each scenario book, right. I think.
Not to the extent, obviously, of Stalingrad, but...
Yeah, it has you, I think, keep track of your casualty numbers and who won or lost, and then it assigns points based off of that, I believe.
Okay. Cool.
I've never actually done that. We
played all the scenarios.
We play them all in order, and that suffices, I think, for me.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll go back and do it the next time that way. Yeah, so North Africa mixes it up quite a bit. Vehicles are really cool. Specific positions within vehicles can only be controlled by specific unit types.
Oh, wow.
So that's interesting. Each time you play a card that's on a vehicle, or that the combat counter is on the vehicle or in the vehicle, you can exit or enter the vehicle or swap spaces within the vehicle. So there's some cool things going on there. I'm really excited to get back to this a little bit more and play through all the rest of the scenarios.
I'm curious to see where this one ends up in your rankings.
Yeah. All right. So moving on, anything else, North Africa?
No, haven't played it. So,
all right, moving on. Reinforcements.
Okay.
2021.
I've got some things to say about reinforcements.
This is cool. So this is basically an expansion for North Africa and Normandy.
Right. Yep.
So it includes 4 additional Normandy expansions, 4 additional North Africa expansions. It adds solo play to all of the
to North Africa and
previous scenarios. Yep. And it also includes rules for playing 4-player.
Right. Which I have not done. You played with David last year? Was that 4-player?
So he played as one of the sides. He double handing.
Yeah.
And one of his friends Him and I played on the other team.
Okay, so it was the 4-player rules.
It was the 4-player rules.
Yeah.
That was my first exposure to Undaunted.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was a year ago. I remember it being amazing, but I don't remember the specifics of the 4-player experience.
But the thing to know is that you can play 4 players if you get the Reinforcements expansion.
And I think
cool.
that's an interesting thing about Undaunted, because not a lot of game groups are just 2 players, right?
Well, that's why, like I mentioned it before, I've had Undaunted the longest in the group. Tyson got it for me for like a Secret Santa. And I didn't play it for the longest time because getting 2-player games played in a game group, it just doesn't work very well.
Yeah.
You know? So the fact that there is 4-player rules is pretty cool.
So it adds some new cards, new soldiers. The riflemen are updated for Normandy. It adds tanks there's some tank cards for Normandy.
I think the main concept, right, though, is that you can swap out units, like rifleman units in Normandy scenarios and North Africa scenarios that have upgraded abilities, right?
Yeah. Again, changed up that rule of you can control a tile, an objective, even if there's an enemy soldier there.
Yeah. If nobody controls the tile yet, somebody can control it. But as soon as somebody controls that tile, then you have to kick off their unit in order to take control back.
Right.
Right. That was I think the updated control rules there.
It also adds mines for the North Africa reinforcement scenarios, which
Cool.
Mines
are awesome.
I haven't played those. I've played a couple of the Normandy reinforcement scenarios, and they're fantastic, just like the rest of them. So
yeah, cool. So you mentioned solo play. I think I'm the only one that's actually played solo scenarios.
I've read the rules and I was going to, and I just didn't get to it. But.
Yep. So one thing to keep in mind, this is not an easy solo experience. So in the rules themselves, they say, don't start off solo if you can help it, right? Like learn the base system first and then jump into the solo scenarios. What first I noticed about the solo version is there is so much work that was put into this to make it work right. It's just blows my mind, right? So the way it works is you pick a scenario and then there is cards for each unit associated with that scenario. So you look at the cards themselves and it'll be a scout card, for example, and then you'll look at the top, there'll be a number on that card and it will correspond to the scenario number, right? So you got to find all the units in this scenario and the cards associated with those units before you get started. Okay. Then you play the game. The main gameplay is very similar, but what makes it complicated is when you're activating a unit, you have to look at the card and you follow it down from top to bottom to see what that unit's going to do, right? And there's like a branching tree of if this happens, then this happens. And then if this happens and it's a tie, this is the tiebreaker. If this is the tiebreaker for the tiebreaker, and then this is
gets a little tedious.
This is ultimately what happens in the end, right? Yeah. So it's it can be a little bit intimidating, a little bit confusing getting through that first solo play. It was a lot better when I did my second solo play, and I could see it getting better and better as you play more, right? So just kind of word of warning going into it. It's there's quite a bit to it, right?
Yeah, and the solo play was done by David Digby, and I think David Turtsey also helped out with that. Which he's kind of
he's the guru of solo,
right? So I still want to try out the solo.
Yeah, and I would much rather play multiplayer.
Yep.
Right? As with any game, I would rather play with somebody on the other side of the table. It probably wasn't my favorite solo experience just because of the complexity, but I'm glad it's there. I'm glad the work was put in and that it's an option, but it was a little bit tough to get through for me. But
so
your mileage may vary though. If you're really into solo and you really want to play Undaunted, then absolutely check it out.
Yeah, you can play every single scenario from North Africa and Normandy, which is incredible.
Yep.
On the flip side of that, I don't imagine Stalingrad's ever getting a solo play.
Yeah, I think David mentioned that.
Yeah,
it's that there's no way that would work. I don't know how you would even do that. So yeah. Yeah.
So let's get into Stalingrad.
Let's do it.
So Stalingrad came out in 2021. It's more of the legacy campaign style.
I think more campaign style. You're not. I mean, this is completely
replayable.
resettable,
Yeah.
right? And replayable. And as we're talking about this, we're going to be careful not to, it is a campaign game. There's things that happen in the story that are, surprising, and we don't want to spoil anything. But we want to talk about some of the differences, some of the cool things that happen. If you look on the back of the box, you're going to see some of the stuff that
we
happens,
can talk
right?
about the generics of what goes on from scenario to scenario. I think
Absolutely.
it's awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome. It is awesome.
So it is 15 scenarios.
So it's a good number of scenarios. And what's cool about it is they're branching scenarios, right? So as you play, the second time you play through, not only can you switch sides, right, and experience something different, you will go different ways in the branching storyline, which I think it's probably going to be very similar to what you played the first time, but there's going to be differences. Right?
Absolutely.
Which, awesome. Fantastic. Really cool.
That branching narrative, I just look forward to getting further into it and then playing it again, swapping sides, and
Seeing how the outcome differs, right?
yeah.
And it was interesting hearing David talk about that. I think he mentioned that was one of his responsibilities, was getting that branching narrative in a place where, you could get the game out. And that was a difficult thing to do. And you can see all the work that was put into that, right?
Yep.
It was really cool.
It reminded me back of the, choose your own adventure books, that I used to read as a kid, where, depending on what you do impacts not just the next scenario, but potentially everything else down the road, right?
Yeah, 1,000 times better though.
Yeah,
right.
I played one of the choose your own adventure board games and I did not like it.
Yeah, the ones that came out like 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah. What happens at the end of a scenario, regardless of who wins?
So you got the casualty phase, right? So this is what really hurts, because you take your casualty pile, and depending on how many casualties you take is how many permanent casualties you're going to take that are out for the game, right? So you shuffle up your casualties, you flip it over. If it's a normal unit, sorry, you're gone, right? And you're out for the game. If it's a rifleman or a scout, or I think a gunner, you're going to bring in a reinforcement, right?
But there's a caveat with that.
They may have a shovel instead of a gun, right?
Or their initiative is significantly less.
Yeah. It's like something is going to be weakened in that unit.
They are
right?
green. It's very thematic. I mean, they are getting called up from basic training, right?
Yep.
And they have a lesser skill and less experience.
Yeah, they got a bandage on their head. They've already been wounded. Something's not right with these guys. But they're here to fight for you. They're going to do as good as they can. But you take permanent casualties. And if you have other units that aren't, like you mentioned, snipers. Your sniper can just go away. You're not going to get a replacement sniper.
Yeah,
right?
and I don't know if there's something later on
There could be.
that brings back more snipers, but for now, Logan's snipers are gone.
Yeah.
And I should freaking tear it up.
Yeah.
I don't know that I will, because he's been destroying me lately. But on the flip side of losing soldiers, at the end of each scenario, you also get to upgrade two
Two of your units. Right?
of your units, right?
Yep.
And that's done randomly.
Yep. You flip over all the cards that you played with in that game. You shuffle those up and start flipping them over. If you flip over a Fog of War, obviously you're not going to upgrade that. But if it's a normal unit, then you're going to find in your upgrade deck that unit. And it's the flip side. They're going to be like super soldiers, right?
Yeah.
They're going to have high initiative, which Mark was lucky enough to get one of those cards early, and that's why he destroyed me on initiative, And
That was a huge difference maker, because one of the things that in our play that Kevin keyed on early was using the deception to flood me with Fog of War cards.
I love that.
I love doing that too.
Conceal action, or I think is what it's called.
Yeah, conceal. And but I had an upgraded scout and realized that, well, every time I scout, I'm going to have to take on even more of those Fog of War cards. So I'm just going to use this guy to ensure that I have initiative. And so when he was in my deck, I could do that and use a card that I wouldn't already play, but make him. It was really powerful to have that guy as an upgraded unit. to control a lot of the narrative.
But what's cool, right, is that I know he has that upgraded scout. I can target scouts and I can try and take them out.
Yep,
right?
you can try and eliminate him and get rid of him.
It's not for sure because it's a little bit random at the end of the scenario, but if you can get rid of that scout, you're like, oh, yes, now it's the thorn in my side is gone for the rest of the game, So that's an interesting part of it as well.
So one thing that also starts changing is buildings are getting damaged.
Yep.
And tiles are, and this happens within the actual scenarios.
Yep.
You replace tiles with more and more rubble as buildings are destroyed, right?
Yeah. So there's a cover bonus for each building, right? You can destroy the building. That cover bonus gets less. You destroy it again, and it's just gone, right?
Right.
Yeah. For the rest of the game. And,
Go ahead.
And it's genius how I think how they handle this, right? Because you have your normal set of Stalingrad tiles, and then as those get destroyed, you replace them with the other pieces. So it's just super seamless how you keep track of the tiles that are in the game, but it's like it lasts for the rest of the game, right?
Well, and it's hilarious because you can just be shelling, these buildings of your opponent and destroying them and wiping them out, and then on a later scenario, you might end up being the one playing from those
in
tiles.
that building, right?
Yeah, or where that building was, and then now it's demolished, so you have no cover bonus in a later scenario.
Yeah, Mark had in our last scenario, he had some tanks that he was getting out, and they were kind of in a bad spot, right? Behind a building. And I'm like, well, why are you going to put your tanks behind that building? And Mark had a genius plan that ended up maybe not panning out exactly how you wanted it to.
The experience was amazing. Did not pan out the way I planned. But what's interesting about those buildings is that it seemed like more often than not, our plays were concentrated in a few number of the tiles. We would have tons of people in a single tile, right? Instead of it being an even distribution across the board, we're like, well, we've got 7 guys all vying for this one space because it's got more, objective points or whatever. And so if there's a building there, it's easier to do that. But once it's gone, all of a sudden everybody's exposed, and now you have people firing at point blank range, and it just turns into a bloodbath.
Yeah.
And before we knew it, we were seeing our casualty pile stack up, and we're thinking, well, that didn't really go like I thought it would.
Yeah. He had his tanks behind this building, and he's like, I'm just going to blow up the building so I can get through. And he came through, and then that was that point where everything was exposed, so.
There are times where one player has a powerful card that comes through. They've got one in their deck that can't be defended against, can't be destroyed, and it can just kind of obliterate the other player's army. Have you guys experienced that at all?
We noticed that once, but the thing about it is that the card that I had, it stood to reason that you'd want to use it early on, but in hindsight, maybe that wasn't necessarily the best move. Like I could have used it more effectively if I had known that.
Destroying me early in that scenario. Yeah.
So I don't know. Like when I read the synopsis of the scenario, and the instructions are different depending on which team you're on. Like, Kevin couldn't see what my secret, ability that was going to come out.
You had secret intel. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, I had some secret intel, and he didn't know. And I thought, oh man, well, I'm going to lure him into this trap, and then as soon as he gets there early on, I'm just going to, I'm going to nail him, and then this scenario will be mine. And I thought I had. I played it early on, and I was like, dude, that was awesome.
Like, this sucks.
Yeah. He's like, are you kidding me? And it turns out to where it didn't have the same impact that I thought it would have.
Well, and that's what's so interesting about this game is you read the scenario, because we read scenarios early on. We're like, this doesn't make sense. This seems so imbalanced, right?
That's right.
This doesn't seem like one side's going to win super easy. And then as you start playing, it's like, oh, you realize, okay, this is how it's working. This is how it's playing out. This is really smart. We've had that experience a number of times.
Very much.
And that's just what you described. And that's this last scenario we played. It's like, oh, okay, I'm going to do this really quick, but maybe I should have waited a little bit. It's that discovery as you're playing these scenarios is really interesting and really cool. I like that.
I really like the fact that the board itself, the engagement always takes place in adjacent areas, right? So when you have one map where you play out the scenario, and then depending on the outcome, you add tiles, or you move over to the next block
of Stalingrad.
It's just adjacent, different areas in the city itself, and the different areas may be controlled by the different, the other side, right? So you could come off this glorious victory and think, oh man, now I control this square, right? Because the entire city is mapped up into different. I control this section, but I'm in good shape. I've got the momentum, and then lo and behold, the next scenario, it's your opponent's got heavy artillery or whatever waiting, and all of a sudden you're outmatched.
Yeah,
seemingly, right?
Yeah.
That's super cool. I love how you can just see, like, even though the city itself would be massive, if you played this thing out on the entire map, I mean, it would take 2 tables.
Right.
But when you're limited to 9 or 10, and you play out the scenario, and then you move those over to the east or the west, or whatever direction, just add 3 more tiles to the edge. You can see the evolution of the action taking place, and how it affects, how the previous action affected what's coming and what could come. And so the buildings that you talk about, when you blow one to smithereens, that tile is still in play for the next scenario potentially, and you could all of a sudden be exposed.
Yeah.
And you just don't know.
Yeah, I love how it has, like, the tiles you're not using are kind of in a darker color, right?
Right.
I love how it shows you where you're at in the city. I just think that's really interesting.
That's
really
awesome.
cool. It's like, wait a minute, I'm back here at 9 January Square. We fought for this before. We battled here before.
Well, and I think it's cool too with the scenarios in the other Undaunteds. The scenario text, the historical text, is kind of at a general level.
Yes.
In Stalingrad, it's a very personal level where
the
cards, the names on the cards are part of the story. And I love that. It just helps get you into the experience even more by having it at that personal level.
Yes, I agree. Yep. Really cool.
Yeah. That was the production that I liked the most. The reinforcements that have the bandage. Oop. No wonder Gunther missed. He's got a bandage over one of his eyes. So
yeah,
poor guy.
Yeah, that is one of the most
cool.
interesting parts of the game for sure. Yeah.
Cool. Anything else that stands out? Or
everything stands out.
It's an incredible experience.
Yeah, it's an awesome experience. I can't wait to finish it out.
Well, the only thing I don't like about it is I'm 2 and 4.
Yeah,
that doesn't sit well with me.
But here's the question. Here's the question that we've had, right? Like, and I think that we haven't read far in advance of, ultimately, how do you? Okay, we understand what the final objective is after all the scenarios, but it's still difficult to tell
exactly how it's going to play out.
Yeah. Okay. Just because you've won this many scenarios, are you really winning or are you not? Right? We don't know yet.
There's going to be maybe some epic conclusion. I don't know.
I hope it lives up to it.
I hope so too. If it's anything like a scenario 9, I would be happy. And I can't imagine they wouldn't have designed something that's just pretty epic at the end. So I'm excited to find out.
And I love that about all the games. As you get further along in the scenarios, you start to have your entire army available to you.
Right.
And that's just,
Which
just makes
cool.
for these epic experiences.
Yeah, it's cool because you know how to use them. You've played them for, 9, 10 scenarios. So you're comfortable with the system and you can just play. And the mechanics kind of melt away and you just get absorbed into the story, which is cool.
And the other thing that I would say about this one too is that each of the scenarios could stand alone, Right. And if you looked at them each individually, that would be a collection of 15 or 16, really cool games, right? But the sum of the parts is much greater because there's that continuity, right?
Mm.
Like the story tells. And I think that if we were to go back and play this again, even with the same sides, it could be an entirely different experience than what we've seen based on any number of variables, right?
Right.
So the, replayability or the, kind of the intrigue of what's coming next isn't lost after you've already gone through the scenario, right? There's no chance it's going to play out exactly the same way. It may start the same way, but
yeah, there are I own a fair number of campaign games. Mm-hmm. They are super hard to get to the table and play. I will get through this one, I guarantee, and I could see myself playing through it again, even even though I have a number of other campaign games that I probably should be playing, I think rather get this one out and start playing again.
It's beefy, and it's by far the most expensive one.
Yeah, it is.
But I think it's well worth what you're paying for.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, for sure.
All right, so let's move on to Battle of Britain.
Battle of Britain.
Oh, so this is the newest one. Came out this year.
Yep, I have played this twice with you, Tyler. You played it a number of additional times, I think, with Logan, right?
Yeah, so I've played 8 scenarios with Logan. I played a couple with Jason at Origins.
So you're almost through all the scenarios.
Played a couple with you. I am.
Okay.
So,
what are your thoughts then?
Dude. Okay, so
it gets better because I know when we first played it, it was like it blew my mind.
Yeah, so my first play of it, there were a couple things that Jason and I weren't sure on when we played it at Origins, and we played a couple scenarios.
You said it felt a little wonky.
It was a little more finicky, but now that I understand a very specific rule, then it makes complete sense and it's not an issue at all.
Okay.
Okay. And that had to do with
what was that rule?
When you were in the same tile as other planes, we were confused about, being able to shoot after moving and then playing another card and being able to shoot before moving again out of the tile, right?
Okay.
And just kind of wrap my brain. I'm slow. Right. Just wrapping my brain around that. Hey, inside this tile, yes, it's a small hex tile that all these planes are in, but really it's a big airspace. And these planes are all flying around within this space.
The scale is different there.
Yes, you can shoot and hit or you can move into the space on one card, shoot and hit, and then play the same card again and shoot and then move out of the space. Yeah. So there was, I don't know that it's finicky, but it was just something we needed to wrap our brains around, right?
It's definitely different. Like this one is the most different of any of the games in the system. So you really have to learn a whole new game.
So anytime you play one of your planes, and this is the Royal Air Force versus Germany, and Germany had a superior Air Force. They generally in the scenarios have fewer planes, but they're
more powerful,
more mobile.
The Luftwaffe, of course.
The Luftwaffe. Yes. Amazing. Anytime you play a planes card, it has to move before or after it does an action, right? If you're attacking, then it can be before or after. If you're maneuvering, unless you're an ace, you have to move first and then maneuver, which is turning your plane's direction left or right. And then you move and maneuver, right? Depending on how many you have. But if you're attacking, you can attack first and then move. So some interesting things there.
Because, it makes sense. You're in a plane. It's always moving, right?
Unless
this is where it breaks down a little bit.
But I love this, and it just makes me laugh, and I don't take it too seriously.
You shouldn't have to. Yeah, it is what it is.
So if you eliminate all of one plane's cards,
it becomes a helicopter.
It becomes a helicopter, right? And it's kind of just sitting there until it's wiped off the board.
Yeah, right.
Or if someone is constantly using the same card for initiative, it's also not moving.
Right, because you're not doing an order.
Doing the action.
Doing an action. Yeah.
So a couple big things that are different. We got rid of Fog of War cards, but we now have Discord cards.
Yes.
Which are basically the same thing. They're useless cards. You can play them as initiative. They're ones. You get them when your planes. So you generally have 2 in a group.
Yep.
And when they are separated by too far of a distance,
they're out of comms.
So anytime you play the section comms card, when the 2 planes in that section are too far apart, you take on a discord.
Yeah, there's like a symbol on the card that says you have to be in comms range. Otherwise, you get a Discord card.
Right. And one of the actions for this section comms is not available if they are separated.
Right.
Some interesting things there. We talked about initiative earlier and how important that is. There are times where if you play a section comms card as initiative, you also take on Discord if those planes are separated.
Yep.
So there's some other interesting decisions there where maybe you have one of those planes in your hand. You don't use the section comms as the initiative, but then you play that plane card to move him back next or close to his
within
comms before you can then play the section comms card. Yeah. I love that aspect of it.
And then there's other times where you just have to be out of comms,
Right.
right?
You're just like, it's like, forget it.
Forget it. I'm going to be out of comms.
I'm taking on Discord.
I'm taking Discord because there's an objective that I need, or there's your opponent has an objective that they're close to. I got to get planes over there, you know?
Yeah.
And sometimes that you got to do that, but that's an interesting decision to make.
When one of the planes in the section is eliminated, though, now you're always out of comms.
You're always out of comms. You have nobody to talk to.
And that's the only time that you can hunker down a card. You can hunker down the section comms card, and it's got different terminology in Battle of Britain, but that's the only time you can hunker down a card and put it back in the supply so that you can avoid taking on Discord once one of those planes has been shot down.
Yeah.
If you need to.
Yeah.
So we played the one scenario Kevin and I did where you needed to bomb
I
ships.
need to bomb the ships. I had
It was the Dunkirk episode.
Yeah. So my
scenario.
new unit was the bombers. That's what it introduced.
Those
in
things are
scenario 2.
ridiculous.
So they're awesome, but they move so slow. And they turn so slow. And then I had my other planes, and there was a number of ships that I had to bomb. That was my objective. And you had to get rid of my bombers, right?
That scenario was awesome.
And it was so much fun because I had my planes that were flying around my bombers trying to protect them. You had your planes were going, directly to my bombers, trying to get rid of them. And it was just so much fun.
It
right?
was. It
was
came
a
down
blast.
to the wire.
It came down to the wire. You got rid of one of my bomber units. I couldn't miss with my bombers.
No, it was ridiculous.
I was hitting every ship,
Yeah.
But even with me hitting every ship, it came down to the end, and it was super exciting and super fun.
But it would have been hilarious if you would have missed that last ship and then you had like 4 or 5 rounds of turning.
Because that was my one shot to get that last one because I had no more bombers, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that you have to move every time you attack it made for a stressful end, but a really exciting end. I loved it. I love the movement. It really feels like you're dogfighting.
It does.
You have to really be careful about your positioning. You get a bonus if you're behind the planes. So it's really exciting when you're, okay, here we go. I'm getting behind. I'm getting in position. A bad thing is when you get stuck against the side, if you're flying off the board, I think, what is it? You take a Discord?
You take a Discord and you basically, you turn it. So the next time you move, you'll still be on the board
play area. Right. Yeah. Sometimes you get in a bad spot. You're in the corner and you can't get out. You take a Discord, which is kind of funny. I loved it. I thought it was just a blast.
It's so much fun.
Yeah, I've got it on pre-order still. I know it's available, but it's being held up by some other games, unfortunately. But I can't wait to get my hands on it.
It does change the rule where a 10 is no longer an automatic success, which makes sense because if you're shooting at someone that's across the channel completely, like, you don't deserve a hit even if you got a 10, right?
Yeah.
That's just, it makes sense. I like it. I like that change.
That is a good change. That's a good change. So, I'm excited to play through the rest of the scenarios for sure.
They're really
great
good.
one.
You get some anti-aircraft. There's these balloons that if you fly into, you blow up.
There's clouds.
There's clouds that add defense value.
Oh, so like smoke or something in another scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think for me, it takes up the tension in the game more than any of the other games do.
Oh,
and learning how to maneuver your planes. And like I said, the Germans can maneuver so much better. Generally, their planes maneuver so much better. And so that's fun trying to deal with playing as the RAF. But
so you mentioned North Africa is the most unbalanced. In the scenarios, maybe than others, is it
the most asymmetric? I would say
not unbalanced. That's a bad word, but asymmetric. Yeah. So, how would Battle of Britain kind of fit into that? Do you think it's more so or less?
I think it. I mean, well,
because
I don't
the
know
Germans
if North
are
Africa
quicker.
is the most, but it set the rest of the series on the path of more
asymmetry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because Normandy is very symmetric, right? Yeah, I would say Battle Britain might be even more asymmetric, but I think it started with North Africa and
kind of set it on that path.
Right.
And obviously Stalingrad is pretty asymmetric.
Right.
Yeah.
yeah, the planes just don't even match up. But generally, the RAF player has more on the map. So, or they have the anti-aircraft guns.
That's how it's balancing. Right?
Yeah.
So you have more maneuverability, less planes.
I will say though, I've only won 2 out of 8 scenarios against Logan.
You are terrible at this game.
Well, that's the thing though. Like we played Normandy, and I think I won 9 out of 11. So I don't know what's. He's just
so that's got to be your highest rated,
rolls.
right?
No, nope. Yeah, let's. I don't know. So we've talked a lot about what we like.
Yeah.
We've gone over specific games. Is there anything that we don't like before we kind of get into our final rankings and thoughts? And
well, I've mentioned the solo variant. I'm not a big fan of it. Not saying that it's bad. It's definitely it's there, and I think people will like it if that's your thing. But I'm not a big fan of the solo variant. The one thing, it can be a little bit imbalanced. It can be a little bit lopsided. We've talked about that. I don't think that's a negative really for me. So not a whole lot that I can really ding this game for.
The only thing that I would say is that for me, the only potential negatives is that if my only experience playing this game was it showed up once at a game night and we played through one scenario, I think it would be largely unfulfilling. Like I would enjoy it, but I would feel frustrated that there's a lot of unfinished business.
right.
And so I don't know how you counter that. I mean, if you don't have the expectation that if you're going to play this game and really in order to enjoy it, you need to see it through to completion.
It's an investment, right?
That's what I mean, right?
Yeah.
So it's not as simple to just, I mean, even, Kevin and I, you and I just trying to find time to get through this
Yeah.
is a challenge. That's not necessarily a negative, but if you're not prepared for that, then it may be tough to, really get the most out of it.
Yeah, it's maybe kind of a neutral point or something to be aware of going into it because, I think you do have to put a little bit of time into this to get the return. Yeah.
Well, I mean, to get the setup done, to understand the rules, the basic rules and the scenario rules, it's a lot of commitment for a single scenario play.
Yeah.
And I could see some people may, if that's all they had, may think, I don't know, the overhead may not be worth it.
Mm-hmm. No,
but with the continuity, like it gets easier and better and deeper. And
once you understand the system, you can get into other expansions and other, the other standalone games that are out there.
Yeah.
So it is an investment.
I don't know if it's a negative against the game. I would just say that it's probably beneficial to understand how to enjoy it the most and get the expectation from the beginning that.
So what are your negatives, Tyler?
I have one small thing. I mentioned.
It's because you lose a lot?
No. I don't care about it. This is a game that I can play.
I completely agree.
Other than the 1 or 2 times where I could not hit the broadside of a barn for the entire game.
Yeah.
This is a game that I play and I could care less if I win or lose because the experience is just awesome.
Yeah. I have that one game that we played was a little deflating, but every other game, win or lose, I'm like,
you just want to experience the moment.
I'm having a great time.
All right, here's my nitpick.
Okay.
Battle of Britain. It's not the helicopter potential situation with helicopters. I think that's hilarious.
Okay.
I think that's unavoidable. It's just is what it is, right?
Okay.
It is the tokens, whether you're playing as the Germans or the RAF, are similar colors.
Okay.
And they use the same designators for a lot of the aircraft. So, they both have R's and Y's and G's. And in some of the other versions of the game, while your soldiers are mingling and crossing enemy lines a little bit,
there's enough room on the tile, right?
Right. And you still kind of, it's easier to tell which ones are yours and which ones aren't.
Yeah. The colors are different enough.
In Battle of Britain, your planes are all over the place.
Yeah.
They're dogfighting. They're in and out. Some of mine are way over there and some of them, his are way over here. And at a quick glance, sometimes it's hard to tell which ones are yours and which ones are not. And just that's a small nitpick, right? Having said that, I love the experience of Battle of Britain and it's an amazing game. And I don't know. It's just fantastic.
So that little nitpick does not diminish your enjoyment.
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
All right. So anything else?
No. Do we want to rank?
Yeah.
Rank
So
them?
we have
With ones that we played.
Ones we've played.
Mark's is going to be easy, I think.
Are we going to rank the whole system with one score and then just say which ones we like in order and our final thoughts?
Let's do the whole system.
Okay, final system.
And then we'll do rankings of all the games we played. Let's do that.
All right. Who wants to go first?
So I'll go first because I've only got one.
All right.
So
I like this.
So my best and my least favorite is the same since I've only played Stalingrad and they're both. However, I will say that based on the endorsements that Tyler initially had and listening to the experiences you've had with the others, I think that I will think very favorably of the other scenarios and I'm excited to play those too. But for Stalingrad, I think I would give it a 5 based on the man, it feels like emotional investment. It seems like maybe overstating it. That seems a little corny, but Kevin's mentioned this multiple times. Like the last scenario we played, it was intense. Like it got ratcheted up to the point where we weren't laughing so much about the snipers missing. We were like face palm, like sweating, like what the heck is going to happen here? Like honestly,
it was crazy.
Man. Yeah. And so, got completely sucked in and we're just over halfway through the game. Right. And so I think that any game that you leave thinking, man, when can I get back? When can I see what's next? What would I do differently? That's the experience that I had over the course of probably 6 nights at the table. We had 5 or 6 maybe.
Yeah,
we did about 2 per play, right?
2. I think we've gotten 3 in there one time.
Okay,
but it's 2 to 3 per night.
Yeah, so call it 4 or 5 different evenings spent playing this game, and each time I've left thinking, man, that was awesome. It was hilarious. It was frustrating. It made me want to do more. And as you guys know, I'm kind of the thematic guy. Like the theme means a lot to me. And so when I think about the historical context of Stalingrad and how it was just such a bloody campaign, and you talk about the unwillingness of the Russians to relent, and they were going to a man, they would die before they would give up anything. And it plays out just like that. You can see the futility of it and you can see the determination and the way it's set up. And so, the way that all the elements came together really helped me, in my mind, envision just what a, I don't know, surreal experience that was, as much as you could get out of a board game. Right. And I don't want to make light of, what really happened there, but honestly, it gave me an appreciation for the historical impact and the understanding of the events that took place there. And so, I was a fan. I was interested before. I'm even more interested now. I can't wait to get back and play it and want to see how the other scenarios play out and compare. But this is one that I could sit down at a, gaming weekend and just play all the way through start to finish and not feel like I wasted my time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting because when we've done like board game weekends in the past, it was always like, oh, we need 3 and 3 in our games. But with Undaunted, that is a 2-player game that I would be happy to play the whole weekend, right?
I agree. Yep. Let's play through all of Stalingrad. Let's play through all of Normandy. Let's play through all of Battle of Britain.
Yeah,
I would be completely content doing that.
So we didn't say this, but a 5 is our highest score. We rank from 1 to 5. 5 is incredible game.
4 is still a great game. 3 is a good game. 2, you're getting a little lower. Yeah. 1, not so great. And 0, kind of throw it in the trash. But I don't think we're playing games like that.
No.
Yeah. All right. I'll go next. This is 5. There's just no doubt about it. Hearing you talk about it, Mark's getting me fired up. Yeah. I want to go play Undaunted Stalingrad right now.
Well, in fairness, you do have all the momentum. So,
Well, yeah, but like you mentioned before, the next scenario could be completely flipped on its ear. I mean, you just don't know.
It's only 9:00. I can go get Logan and we can play some side-by-side.
Reinforcements.
Yeah. Or Battle of Britain and North Africa.
Hey, we might have to squeeze in one, right?
That'd be awesome.
But the whole we're talking about the system as a whole. all the games have their own different flavor, right? Which they're all amazing in their own right. I love the initiative concept, like we've talked about. That makes for some super interesting decisions. I love the narrative that unfolds. Like this whole system is why I play games, right? For this type of experience. It's really fun, really amazing. It's a 5 for me for sure.
Nice.
Yeah.
So how would you rank or order the ones that you've played?
Well, you do your final thoughts.
Oh,
you do your ranking.
We're going to come back to that.
And let's come back to that.
Okay. So hands down, this is a 5 for me. No surprise there.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I love the initiative. I love the pace of play. I love the decisions of, trying to complete your objectives and how much are you willing to risk different units and how do you position them? And do I give up the cover bonus? And just all these incredible decisions.
Yeah.
You add in the dice rolls. Those are fun and just create some hilarious and funny moments, whether it's just some lucky, incredible shot or somebody can't hit somebody point blank, right?
Yeah,
it just adds to the story. Something we didn't really talk about too much. This is a deck building game, right?
Yeah. And
100%.
there's decisions around how you build your deck.
And
Right.
destroying game too.
Right.
Both.
Yeah, but the deck building aspect, there are fine line between putting too many cards in your deck from your supply
Absolutely.
and not putting enough and then having
then
your riflemen get
are
pinned.
routed.
Absolutely.
Or pinned.
Or routed, yeah.
Yeah.
And just, I love those decisions. I talked about that time where Logan was down to his last scout and basically got to play him every turn and use the sergeants and the platoon leader to,
Inspire.
just go through the cards faster and inspire, right?
Yeah,
And
right.
just this incredible experience. I don't know. I love the pace of play. I love the initiative versus which cards do I want to play this round. I love how fast the game moves. I love the immersion into the experience from the text to the art to the scenario objectives. It's such an incredible experience. So absolutely a 5 for me. I cannot wait to see what's coming in the future.
Yeah. I can't either. Insta buy for me. So.
Yeah. And I don't care that we have multiple copies.
No, I
So
don't care
worth
either.
it.
Yeah. All right. So ranking.
Okay.
All right. Stalingrad, number 1.
Okay.
Hands down.
Okay.
Just the best version of the game, in my opinion.
I also have it as my last.
All right. It changes it up in just amazing ways. The fact that you have reinforcements and casualties that are permanent and just the destruction of the city just is awesome. One thing we didn't mention about Stalingrad is when you get routed, you spawn enemies with your riflemen. There's not spawn points, and that adds a whole other different strategy to the game, which I think is just fantastic. So Stalingrad, number 1. Number 2 is Battle of Britain. Battle of Britain. Fantastic. I've only played 2 scenarios, but it sucked me in from the first scenario. It was just awesome. I love the way that it changes it up, the dogfighting, all the reasons we talked about, right? Don't need to belabor that anymore. Number 3. So I've got reinforcements and
North Africa and Normandy.
I haven't played North Africa. So just Normandy and reinforcements.
I think it's kind of a weird comparison.
It is kind of a weird comparison, right? So Normandy and then reinforcements. I don't know.
Yeah.
Could be. Like I said, I don't really like the solo version. I love the cards that are added though. So, whatever, however those 2 shake out. But, But Stalingrad, Battle of Britain, Normandy is what I'll go with.
All right. So my number 1 it's hands down Battle of Britain.
Oh,
It's
really?
Yeah.
Has not played scenario 9 yet.
I know. Your tune may change, right?
My scenario 9 could be way different than your scenario 9.
It could be.
Which is awesome.
But
It will be totally different.
I'm so
Not less
excited
epic.
for you to get to that one.
Okay.
But, yeah.
So, Battle of Britain for me is number 1.
Awesome.
Stalingrad's number 2. What it does there. I've had some rough.
But there was a little hesitation.
There was, because I have played a few scenarios against Logan where I felt like I didn't even have a chance. There was one where I had to move tanks across the board and to a certain location. And
100%.
it was very frustrating.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Mark's like, yeah. I had the same experience.
but I think that combined with a sequential loss after loss after loss.
Okay.
I
Little deflating.
there was a
maybe.
little hesitation there, but what it does, changing up your army, replacing, elevating soldiers,
destroying the city.
Yeah, it's incredible, amazing. Yes, absolutely. Number 2. I think I'm going to go with North Africa next, even though I have fewer plays of anything of North Africa, and then Normandy. And then I think it's just kind of weird comparing reinforcements to the others.
Reinforcement adds scenarios and cards, right?
Yeah,
so it's basically, it's more of an expansion.
Right. And if you get into Undaunted, definitely go out and get reinforcements.
Yeah, for sure.
It adds a lot. And the fact that you can play with 4-player, even though we haven't done that in our group, that seems cool too. So along with if you're a solo player. So that's my order. So Battle of Britain, Stalingrad, North Africa, Normandy, and then reinforcements.
Cool. Not a bad game in the bunch.
No.
For sure.
Definitely not.
We could talk another hour. I mean, we've
been blabbing on for a long time.
We have. We've abbreviated some of the conversation though, but there is so much here to talk about.
Well, the reality of this is that it would be amazing to be able to talk about the exact scenarios that we've had in our play, but it would be such a disservice because it would spoil so much of the unknown, right?
The discovery for
one of the things I think that's worked out well for us is that we haven't gone beyond the fact to see what's coming, right? We've only read up to what we're playing. And so, Kevin and I have been kind of learning as we go. And so every time there's a new scenario introduced, there's a new wrinkle that we're like, we've never seen this before. Holy cow, where did this come from? How is this going to play out? So it's all brand new.
Yeah.
And it would be a major disservice to talk about this one time in this one scenario. This is how it was. It would just ruin it. So there's not a ton we can say without,
spoiling, other than it's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that wraps up the Undaunted episode. We're going to be going to Gen Con next week. Excited about that.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. That's next week. Holy cow.
It is.
Oh my gosh.
So I think it's safe to say our follow-on episode, our full-length episode after this is going to be a Gen Con recap. We're going to do a snapshot episode in between there, hopefully. Yep. Welcome to the Moon.
Welcome to the Moon. Fantastic roll and write game.
Yeah. We've hoped you both enjoyed the interview with David Thompson and the discussions that we've had about this incredible system and these individual games. Join our Discord to enter to win a brand new unopened copy of Battle of Britain.
Free to you. Shipping included.
In the U.S.
Within the U.S., absolutely.
So join our Discord, find out how to enter to win that, and we will be announcing the winner in about a week from after the episode airs. Mark, thanks for being back on.
Thanks for having me. It was a great time.
Yeah.
This was an easy one to talk about.
Yeah.
This was a blast to talk about.
I just want to go play.
I know. I
don't know which one, but I want to go play any of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Just one more shout out to David Thompson for both being available for an interview and giving us the giveaway copy of Battle of Britain.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Longest Turn Board Gaming Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you want more Longest Turn in your life, please check us out on Instagram. Also, be sure to check us out on Board Game Geek, where you can join our guild, Guild 3947, and check out our blog, where we post all our show notes and occasionally post more detailed reviews. If that's not enough for you, we have a Discord server. If you want to play a game with us on Board Game Arena, join our Board Game Arena group, The Longest Turn. Until next time, thanks for listening.
Tot ziens.
Goodbye.
See you later.
In this episode, we're going to do
stuff.
All of your dreams will come through if you listen.
Yeah.
It's for Pedro.
I'm going to redo that though.
Do the whole thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Again. Not the whole thing.
Not the whole thing.
Just the end part of the thing.
Huzzah.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, here we go. So let's do
Just
like our
scrap that whole awkward conversation. I love the pace of play. I love the pace. Dang it. I still got a p in there.